What if the future of humanity rested on one man's shoulders? What if that man was Elon Musk, and the future he built was on Mars? The sun was setting over the Martian horizon, casting long shadows across the red, rocky landscape. The sky, an endless expanse of muted oranges and deep reds, was a reminder of just how far Elon Musk had come. A few years ago, the idea of humans living on Mars seemed like nothing more than a distant dream, a bold concept that only a handful of visionary scientists dared to entertain. But now, standing on the surface of the red planet, Elon could see that dream beginning to take shape, right in front of his eyes. In the distance, the outline of the first Martian city was barely visible, an achievement he had poured his heart, soul, and nearly all of his wealth into creating. The dome-shaped habitat, now home to a small group of astronauts, scientists, and engineers, was just the beginning. There were more cities to build, more challenges to overcome, and a future to forge for humanity on this distant planet. But today was different. Today, something felt off. A subtle unease tugged at him as he stood at the edge of the habitat, his eyes tracing the horizon. The sky, though beautiful, felt far too quiet. "What's wrong?" he asked aloud, though no one was around to answer. It was as if the silence of Mars itself was pressing in on him. The desolate, barren beauty of the planet had always been awe-inspiring, but today, it felt heavy. Too heavy. His boots crunched against the gritty surface of the planet as he made his way back to the habitat, his thoughts racing. He had dreamed of this moment for so long, of standing here, in the midst of the greatest achievement in human history. But now, as he walked through the Martian dust, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go wrong. Maybe it was the pressure. Maybe it was the constant isolation. Maybe it was the realization that the weight of the entire human race's future rested on his shoulders. "Maybe I'm just tired," he muttered to himself. As he entered the habitat, he was greeted by the low hum of machinery and the steady beep of the oxygen systems. It was a strange sound, comforting, yet alien, like the pulse of a living organism, one that had to be carefully maintained or else everything would collapse. Mars was unforgiving, and the colony's survival depended on precision. One mistake, one system failure, could mean disaster. There was no room for error here. And with each passing day, the pressure to succeed only grew heavier. He took a deep breath and removed his helmet, the cool, recycled air of the habitat filling his lungs. It felt good to be back inside, even if only for a moment. He walked past the small team of engineers and scientists working in the control room, their faces illuminated by the glow of their monitors. Elon, one of the engineers, Sarah, called out as he walked past. "We've been going over the data from the life support system. There's something we need to discuss." Elon stopped and turned, his curiosity piqued. Sarah was one of the brightest engineers on the team, someone he trusted implicitly. If she was calling him over, it was for something important. "What's going on?" Elon asked, his voice low, almost cautious. "We're getting strange fluctuations in the oxygen levels," Sarah replied, her brow furrowed with concern. "It's not a critical failure yet, but it's not something we've seen before. It could be a sign of a bigger problem down the line." Elon's heart skipped a beat. The oxygen system was the lifeblood of the colony. If that failed, they wouldn't survive the night. He stepped closer, peering at the data on the screen. The numbers danced in front of him, indicating slight, but consistent dips in oxygen levels. "This is bad," he said, his mind already running through possible causes. "Can we isolate the issue? Do we have time to fix it?" Sarah nodded, though the uncertainty in her eyes mirrored his own. "We can try, but it's going to take time. The system's too complex, and any minor mistake could make things worse. We don't have the luxury of a backup system. We're relying on everything working perfectly." Elon sighed and rubbed his temples. The weight of the colony's survival was pressing down on him. This was what he had always feared, the moment when the reality of Mars, with all its complexities and dangers, would rear its ugly head. The failure of Earth's safety nets, the long distance from help, and the sheer inhospitable nature of Mars, it was all too much. "You'll figure it out, Sarah. I know you will." He gave her a brief smile, though it felt forced. He didn't have the luxury of showing weakness, not now, not when the stakes were so high. "Let me know if you need anything from me." "Of course," she replied, turning back to her monitors. As Elon left the control room and made his way to the observation deck, he tried to push the worry from his mind. But it was difficult. Mars was not a place for mistakes. One wrong move could spell disaster. He stepped up to the window, staring out at the Martian landscape. The red dust swirled in the wind, a reminder that nature was unpredictable and unforgiving. He thought back to the day he had first set foot on this planet. The exhilaration, the sense of wonder at being the first human to walk on Mars. But that sense of awe had faded quickly as the realities of colonization set in. The constant struggle to make the colony self-sustaining, the ever-present danger of malfunctioning systems, and the loneliness. Elon had spent most of his life dreaming of this moment, of building a future on Mars for humanity. But now, standing here, he wondered if he had underestimated the challenges. He had wanted to save humanity from the dangers of Earth, to ensure that the human race had a backup plan in case things went wrong. But at what cost? He gazed out at the vast emptiness that stretched before him, a blank canvas for the future of humanity. The silence of Mars was deafening. No birds. No animals. No wind or rain. Just the endless, desolate beauty of a world waiting to be shaped. But the question remained, could humanity really survive here? Was Mars truly a place where life could thrive, or was it just another barren rock, destined to remain empty and lifeless? "Maybe I am the right person for this," he muttered to himself. "Maybe I am the only person who can make this work." But as the first stars began to twinkle in the Martian sky, he knew that the journey ahead would be far more difficult than he had ever imagined. And whether or not he could succeed, he didn't know. What he did know was that, for better or for worse, this was his mission. And there was no turning back. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Elon Musk had always believed that the most audacious ideas were the ones worth pursuing. It wasn't just about building a car company that revolutionized electric vehicles. It wasn't just about launching reusable rockets or constructing tunnels beneath traffic-heavy cities. No, Elon's dream had always been bigger than that. It was the kind of vision that made people laugh at first, then made them question their entire worldview. And that vision had always centered around Mars. But where did it all begin? Growing up in Pretoria, South Africa, Elon had always been fascinated by technology and space. He was a curious child, often found with his nose buried in a science fiction book, dreaming of interplanetary travel. His favorite stories were the ones that painted a future where humanity reached beyond Earth and colonized other worlds. At the time, Mars was the most obvious candidate. After all, it was the planet closest to Earth, and it was the one that seemed the most attainable in terms of human exploration. But back then, Mars was nothing more than a distant speck in the sky, the subject of occasional space missions and scientific speculation. As a teenager, Elon became obsessed with the idea of space. It was more than just a passing interest, it was a calling. He started teaching himself everything he could about rockets, propulsion systems, and space exploration. By the time he was in his early 20s, he had already read most of the great works on the subject. He was well aware that the technology to colonize Mars didn't exist, but he was equally aware that if humanity were to survive in the long term, it would have to leave Earth. It was this knowledge, this understanding of humanity's fragility, that pushed him toward a future in space. It wasn't until he moved to the United States to attend school at the University of Pennsylvania that he began to understand the full scope of what would be required to make this vision a reality. He saw firsthand how entrenched the space industry was in bureaucracy and inefficiency. Governments and large organizations controlled most of the funding and research, and progress was slow. But Elon wasn't deterred. Instead, he decided to change the game by starting his own company, SpaceX. He poured his heart and soul into SpaceX, navigating one failure after another, refusing to give up even when the odds seemed insurmountable. There were multiple rocket explosions, financial crises, and moments when it seemed like he was just a few steps away from losing it all. But somehow, against all odds, SpaceX succeeded. The first successful launch of the Falcon 1 rocket in 2008 was a turning point, proving to Elon and the world that private companies could make space exploration a reality. That victory, however, was just the beginning. Elon's dream of Mars wasn't just about sending rovers or astronauts to the Red Planet. It was about creating a sustainable colony, a self-sufficient ecosystem where human beings could live, work, and thrive. To Elon, it wasn't just a matter of exploring space, it was a matter of saving humanity from the existential threats that loomed over Earth. Climate change, overpopulation, nuclear war, these were all risks that, in his mind, could wipe out life on Earth. Mars, however, represented a new beginning, a fresh start. A backup plan. When the idea of establishing a human colony on Mars started to gain traction, Elon became even more determined. He began developing the Starship rocket, a massive, reusable spacecraft capable of carrying hundreds of people to Mars. At first, many were skeptical. They didn't understand why Elon was so focused on this distant planet. Why not focus on solving Earth's problems? After all, Earth needed saving too. But to Elon, the two problems weren't separate. Solving Earth's challenges while building a backup plan for humanity were part of the same grand vision. He believed that establishing a permanent human presence on Mars wasn't just a bold idea, it was an inevitability. And he was willing to do whatever it took to make it happen. As SpaceX developed Starship, Elon grew more obsessed with Mars. It became more than just a business venture or a scientific endeavor, it became a personal mission. His obsession with the Red Planet became all-consuming. Late nights in the lab, sleepless flights to coordinate SpaceX's efforts, and an unyielding drive to push the boundaries of what was possible, he gave everything to make the dream of Mars a reality. And then, in 2024, the dream began to take shape. The first successful human landing on Mars, courtesy of SpaceX's Starship, was nothing short of a miracle. Elon stood on the stage as the world watched, witnessing the birth of a new era in human exploration. He had done it. Mars was no longer a dream, it was real. But success, as he would soon learn, wasn't the end of the journey. It was just the beginning. As Elon stood in the Martian habitat, staring out at the barren landscape, he thought back to that first moment of triumph. It had been a victory not just for him, but for humanity. He had made history, and for a moment, it had all seemed perfect. But perfection was fleeting, especially on Mars. He remembered the challenges, the struggles to get to this point. The countless hours spent negotiating with governments, securing funding, and overcoming technical hurdles. He thought about the critics who said it was impossible, that humans would never survive on Mars. He had heard it all, and yet, here he was, on the surface of another planet, watching the first light of a new day rise over a world that had once seemed so unreachable. But success had a way of coming with its own set of problems. And that was the part Elon had always known would be the hardest. There were the dangers of the environment, radiation, dust storms, the cold. The technological obstacles that came with creating a self-sustaining colony. And, perhaps most challenging of all, the question of whether humans would be able to adapt to life on Mars. Elon's dream of a thriving Martian colony was still just that, a dream. The hard work was only beginning, and the stakes were higher than ever. There was no going back now. The future of humanity on Mars rested on his shoulders, and he wasn't about to let it slip away. "All right," he muttered to himself as he turned back to the control room. Time to get to work. The hum of recycled air filled the habitat, a low, constant buzz that masked the tension building beneath the surface. Elon paced the narrow corridor between the operations center and the hydroponics lab, his mind racing. The oxygen fluctuation issue wasn't just a technical hiccup, it was a crack in the fragile foundation they'd built. And like everything on Mars, cracks spread fast. Inside the main ops room, a group of engineers, scientists, and mission planners sat around a table, their voices rising in frustration. Elon walked in just as Dr. Mateo Alvarez, the mission's lead medical officer, was finishing a sentence that ended with the words, "We shouldn't even be here." A hush fell over the room as Elon entered. He knew the look they gave him, half awe, half resentment. To them, he wasn't just a teammate. He was the man who brought them here. The one whose vision they were all risking their lives for. Elon folded his arms. "Go ahead, Mateo. Say it again." Mateo leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "We're understaffed, under-resourced, and barely holding this place together. One oxygen scare, and suddenly we're all realizing how thin the line is between survival and catastrophe. Some of us think we need to consider evacuation." The word hung in the air like a knife. Evacuation. No one wanted to say it, but the stress of surviving on a planet with zero margin for error was wearing on everyone. Elon could see it in their faces, dark circles under eyes, weight loss from limited rations, the occasional tremor in someone's hand. These weren't just highly trained professionals anymore. They were people on the edge. "We didn't come here to give up the first time something went wrong," Elon said, his voice quiet but cutting through the room like a scalpel. "No one's giving up," chimed in Ava Green, the mission's chief engineer. "But let's be real, Elon, we've had 4 system failures this month." 4. And the oxygen issue was a red flag. If it wasn't for Sarah catching the error, we could have suffocated in our sleep. "We're burning out, and this place isn't Mars City yet. It's a tin can with solar panels." Elon looked at each of them, Ava, Mateo, Sarah, Gregor, Lynn. Every one of them was handpicked. The best of the best. Brilliant minds. Strong wills. Survivors. But even survivors had breaking points. He took a deep breath. "Do you remember why you signed up for this?" Silence. "You came here because you believed in something bigger than yourself." "I didn't promise comfort. I didn't promise safety. I promised challenge, risk, and the chance to be part of something no one's ever done before. You didn't sign up for Earth 2.0, you signed up for the frontier." Mateo shook his head. "That speech might have worked on Earth, but we're not on Earth anymore." "No," Elon replied, "we're not. And that's exactly why we can't afford to start thinking like we are." Ava stood. "Elon, with all due respect, we're engineers, scientists, not colonists. Not yet. We're trying to survive, not build a utopia. We need more resources, more support from Earth. And if that means sending half of us back on the next return launch, so we can regroup and come back stronger, then maybe that's the smartest move." A low murmur of reluctant agreement followed. Elon's jaw tightened. This was the moment he'd always feared, not technical failure, but human doubt. Fear, creeping in like dust through a cracked seal. "I'm not stopping anyone from leaving," he said after a pause. "If you want to go home, you'll get on the next launch window. No questions asked." That surprised them. Elon never backed down. But he wasn't finished. "But if you stay," he continued, "you're staying because you believe. You're staying because this," he gestured to the rust-colored world outside the observation window, "is the future. Not because it's easy, but because it's necessary." Sarah broke the silence. "I'm staying." Elon turned to her. She looked tired, pale, but determined. "We came here to make this place work. It's not perfect. It might never be. But I didn't come all this way to quit." One by one, the others followed. "I'm in," Ava said, with a nod. "So am I," said Lynn. Mateo was the last to speak. You know, I think this mission is reckless. But I also know history doesn't remember the safe bets. I'm not ready to be remembered for playing it safe. The tension in the room loosened, just slightly. Elon exhaled. For now, the team was holding. But the cracks were still there, visible, widening. And the next crisis might break more than just machinery. Later that night, Elon sat alone in the greenhouse dome. The artificial lighting cast a gentle glow on rows of leafy green swaying in their hydroponic baths. It wasn't much, but it was life. Green, living proof that Earth could bloom on Mars. He recorded a message to send back to Earth, one of the many he sent to inspire, to update, to remind humanity of what was at stake. Today wasn't about rockets or reactors, he began, speaking softly into the camera. It was about people. The hardest part of colonizing Mars isn't the distance, the cold, or the radiation. It's keeping hope alive when everything tells you to let go. But we didn't let go today. And we won't tomorrow either. He paused, then added, hit subscribe, and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? He turned off the camera and looked out the dome window. The red planet stretched out before him, cold and silent, but full of potential. The frontier wasn't breaking them. It was forging them. The alarm pierced the habitat like a knife. A shrill, pulsing tone that immediately sent adrenaline spiking through every crewmember's body. It wasn't a drill, drills were controlled, rehearsed. This was chaos. Real, unscripted panic. Elon bolted upright from his bunk, heart pounding, ears already straining to catch the robotic voice echoing over the internal comm system. Warning, life support system integrity compromised. Oxygen levels unstable. Immediate action required. He was on his feet in seconds, boots slamming against the alloy floor as he sprinted down the corridor toward the command center. Red emergency lights strobed along the walls. Sleepy-eyed engineers and scientists were already racing to their stations, every one of them too trained, too professional to scream, but their eyes were wide with fear. Sarah was already there, fingers flying across her terminal. Main O2 loop just dropped by 18% in the last 2 minutes, she barked out. We're venting oxygen somewhere, and fast. Ava stormed in behind him, still zipping up her suit jacket. Could it be the outer greenhouse valve? That seal's been on the maintenance list. Negative, Sarah snapped. I isolated that system. This is internal. Elon didn't speak. He didn't need to. His mind was a storm of calculations, possibilities, timelines. Oxygen was dropping. Fast. That meant one thing, a breach. Somewhere, somehow, their artificial oasis on a dead planet was leaking life into the void. Bring up the diagnostics for sectors C through E, Elon ordered. Screens flickered as they zoomed in on the habitat schematic. A red warning flashed over Sector D2, housing, storage, and the environmental control core. A part of the station Elon knew like the back of his hand. There, Sarah said, pointing. Pressure is dropping in the environmental unit. It's bleeding out into the subducts. Gregor's voice came through on the comm, laced with tension. I'm in D2 now. There's a hissing sound coming from behind panel 6. Looks like a fracture in the oxygen mainline. Ava cursed under her breath. We don't have a replacement for that line. That's part of the original life support core from Earth. Do we shut it down? Sarah asked. If we shut it down, Elon replied, we lose all atmospheric processing for the West Wing. We'd have to evacuate half the crew to secondary modules, and that buys us, 24 hours before CO2 hits critical. A moment of silence. Then Elon made the call. I'm going in. Ava spun on him. Absolutely not. We'll send a tech. You're too important to risk. I'm not more important than oxygen, he snapped. Gear me up. I built that system. I know it better than anyone. No one argued after that. 10 minutes later, Elon stood in front of the pressure door to Sector D2, fully suited up in an EVA-rated suit. His breath was loud in the helmet, each inhale and exhale a metronome of risk. Sarah's voice crackled in his ear. O2 pressure in the line still dropping. You've got maybe 15 minutes before we're at critical thresholds for breathable air in 3 modules. Copy that, he said. Going in. The door hissed open, and Elon stepped into the dimly lit corridor. The air was thinner now, noticeable, even in the suit. A fine mist of frost clung to the walls, crystallized condensation from the leak. He moved fast, memory guiding him to panel 6. The hiss grew louder as he approached. He dropped to his knees, popped open the latches, and there it was, a jagged, hairline fracture in the titanium oxygen conduit, releasing a steady white stream of precious gas into the room. Confirmed fracture, Elon reported. About 6 centimeters. This is bad. Can you patch it? Ava asked. He pulled out a repair sleeve from his toolkit, slid it over the break, and twisted it into place. The hiss slowed but didn't stop. Partial seal. It's holding back maybe half. I need to reinforce it. Secondary patch kit is in storage bay 2, Sarah said. But that's another 20 meters. Elon was already moving. On it. The floor trembled suddenly beneath him. He froze. What the hell was that? Pressure feedback, Ava replied. Too much escaping too fast. The regulators are going into emergency bypass. Elon, you have 5 minutes. After that, the main system shuts down completely. Elon ran. Every second felt like a sprint against the vacuum. His boots slammed against the corridor, suit sensors screaming about pressure drops, oxygen depletion, and structural strain. By the time he reached the storage bay, his hands were shaking from the cold creeping through his gloves. He grabbed the secondary patch kit and raced back. 3 minutes, Sarah warned. Back at the fracture, he dropped to the floor, tore open the kit, and applied the second patch, an emergency polymer sealant designed to bond to metal even in zero-pressure environments. He slathered it over the crack, pressed the repair plate down, and locked it in. The hissing stopped. Complete silence. O2 pressure stabilizing, Sarah breathed. Levels holding steady. We've got it. Cheers erupted over the comms. Even Ava, ever the realist, let out a victorious whoop. Elon sat back against the wall, his body aching, chest heaving. The silence now felt different, relieved, alive. Back in the command center, the tension broke like a fever. People clapped, hugged, laughed nervously. Relief always came at a price on Mars. But today, they'd paid it, and survived. That evening, after everything had been stabilized and the team had had their first full meal in days, Elon sat again in the greenhouse, where the plant swayed gently under artificial light. Sarah joined him, 2 mugs of synthesized tea in hand. You're insane, you know that, she said, handing him one. He smirked. That's not news. They sat in silence for a few minutes, sipping tea and watching the tiny lettuces grow. We almost lost it today, she said quietly. The whole thing. Elon nodded. Yeah. But we didn't. She looked at him, curious. How do you keep believing in this? Even when it nearly kills you? He thought about it for a moment. Because if we don't do this, who will? She smiled faintly, then leaned back. Well, next time, maybe let someone else do the suicidal space plumbing. No promises, he said, grinning. Outside, the Martian night fell again, deep, red, and cold. But inside, there was warmth. Hope. And breath. Do you remember the first time you stepped outside into the unknown, when everything in your body said turn back, but something deeper said keep going. It had been 47 sols, Martian days, since the crisis in D2. The patch was holding, systems were stable, and for the first time in weeks, the team had room to breathe, literally and figuratively. But Elon Musk wasn't one to rest on a win. Stability wasn't the mission. The mission was expansion. Discovery. Building not just survival, but momentum. So when Ava brought him the proposal, a multi-day expedition beyond the perimeter of the habitat, a scouting mission to map nearby terrain and search for mineral deposits, they both knew it was time. Most of the team thinks it's too early, Ava had said. But if we're going to build a second outpost, we need data. Real data. Elon had looked at the map spread across the table, low-resolution topography from orbital scans. Jagged ridges. Deep valleys. A strange, sloping crater a few kilometers west that hadn't been explored. This crater, he said, tapping it. That's our first trip. And just like that, the Mars expedition began. The rover, Starbug 7, was a modified, six-wheeled monster of a machine, built to handle everything the Martian terrain could throw at it. Inside, it was cramped, 2 seats in the cockpit, 2 fold-down bunks, food storage, scientific gear, oxygen backup, and emergency supplies. The crew, Elon, Ava, and Lin, a resource geologist from Vietnam who spoke with precision and moved with purpose. They left at first light, if you could call it that. The Martian morning was muted, the sun rising like a dull ember over the crimson plains. Elon sat in the front, hands gripping the controls, heart pounding with that familiar mix of fear and thrill. Behind them, the habitat shrank with distance until it was just a white dot against an ocean of rust. You know, Lin said as the rover bounced along the uneven ground, on Earth, I used to hike volcanoes for fun. Mars feels like that, like you're always just one wrong step away from something ancient waking up beneath your feet. Elon laughed. That's poetic. Also terrifying. They drove for hours, the rover crawling over boulders, sand dunes, and jagged ridges. Outside, the planet remained quiet, too quiet. The radio hummed with static. Occasionally, Sarah would check in from base. You're at 20 clicks. All readings nominal. Weather shows no storms. Everything seemed fine. Until it wasn't. It started with a flicker on Lin's screen. We've got a shift in the magnetometer, she said. Unusual interference. Could be, metallic. Metallic? Ava leaned forward. Ichor deposits? Lin adjusted the sensor. Maybe. Or, something else. Elon's fingers tightened on the controls. Give me a heading. The rover veered west, toward the sloping crater. As they approached the edge, the ground dropped sharply. A deep basin, at least 100 meters across, lay before them, far steeper and more irregular than the satellite images suggested. At the center, jutting from the rock, was something unmistakably unnatural. Angular. Reflective. Metallic. Elon's mouth went dry. What the hell is that? Ava whispered. Lin's voice was barely audible. That's not a rock. They stopped the rover, grabbed their gear, and stepped into the Martian dust. Every crunch beneath their boots felt like a drumbeat. The object, half buried, was about 10 feet tall and shaped like a slanted obelisk. Its surface shimmered with flecks of alloy not native to Mars. Ava ran a scanner over it. The readings were inconsistent. Like the material was interfering with the tech. Could be a meteorite, Lin offered. But even she didn't sound convinced. Elon reached out, touched the surface with his gloved hand. It was cold, colder than the surrounding rock, and completely smooth. We need to get this back to base, he said. If it moves. They set up a perimeter, documented everything, and left a sensor beacon to monitor it. Back at the rover, Lin stayed quiet as they drove. Elon watched her in the mirror. You've seen something like that before, he asked. She hesitated. Not like that. But, in Antarctica, we found a fossil once. Deep in the ice. The feeling I had today, it was the same. Like we weren't supposed to find it. Ava rolled her eyes. That's just the isolation talking. Maybe, Lynn said softly. Or maybe this planet isn't as dead as we think. They returned to the habitat after 32 hours off base. The team swarmed them with questions, but the data spoke louder than anything. The object wasn't Martian in origin. It emitted a low-frequency pulse that hadn't stopped since they left. Signals repeating, Sarah said, eyes wide. Every 41 minutes. Almost like, it's waiting for something. Elon stared at the readout, a mix of wonder and dread churning in his gut. We came here to build a future, he said quietly. What if we just unearthed the past? A long silence followed. Then Elon turned to the camera, recording a new message for Earth. Today, we made a discovery. Not just of rock or ice or potential minerals. We found something we didn't expect, something that doesn't belong to Mars as we know it. What it is, we don't yet understand. But one thing's certain, Mars just got a lot more interesting. He paused. And maybe we're not the first ones to stand here after all. Can you feel it? Lynn asked, her voice low, eyes fixed on the live data feed projected above the table. It's not just a signal. It's alive. Or was. The room fell silent. The object, now labeled Artifact Alpha, had continued to emit a faint, rhythmic pulse every 41 minutes since they'd left the crater. But today, something changed. The interval shortened. First to 40 minutes, then to 39.6. And now, it was pulsing every 38.9 minutes. That may not sound like much. But on Mars, small changes mean big consequences. Ava leaned over the console, scrolling through the waveform logs. It's not just a signal, it's modulating. The frequency is shifting slightly every few hours, and look here, she enlarged the spectrograph, there's a harmonic embedded in the carrier wave. Like it's trying to say something. Elon stood still, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the screen. His mind was racing again. Not with fear, but with possibility. What if it's not just emitting, he asked. What if it's scanning? Ava looked up. Scanning what? He looked straight at her. Us. For the next 72 sols, the habitat transformed into a full-blown Martian research lab. Lynn ran material analysis on a microscopic sample they'd managed to retrieve from Artifact Alpha. The alloy was unlike anything on Earth or Mars, an exotic composite of nickel, tungsten, and something unidentifiable that resisted ionization under intense heat. Gregor built a remote drone to revisit the site and monitor environmental changes. The dust around the object had begun to settle in unusual patterns, forming faint geometric ridges that didn't match wind patterns or known terrain movement. Sarah, with the help of a linguistics AI shipped from Earth, began analyzing the waveform's harmonics. There's a pattern emerging, she said one evening over dinner, eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. It's not random. It's almost musical. You think it's language? Ava asked. Sarah nodded. Maybe not in the way we think of language, but yes, some kind of encoded intelligence. A mathematical sequence. Maybe a greeting. Maybe a warning. Elon couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the edge of something massive. All his life he'd wanted to go beyond Earth, not just physically, but intellectually. Philosophically. To take humanity to the next level. This felt like the door to that. But doors can open both ways. Then came the tremor. It hit during the team's morning briefing. A low, deep rumble that vibrated through the floor panels like the hum of a distant engine. Not violent, just strange. Wrong. Everyone froze. Mars doesn't quake like this, Lynn said. There's no tectonic activity near this region. Ava checked the habitat sensors. Reading ground vibration localized to a 10-kilometer radius around the artifact. Intensity increasing by 0.4% every hour. And then the power flickered. Just once. A split-second blink in the LEDs. But on Mars, even a flicker matters. Are you saying the artifact is causing this? Matteo asked, walking in, still zipping up his jacket. Not causing, Elon said. Responding. To what? To us. He didn't say it, but they all felt it. We woke something up. Elon decided to go back. Against every protest from the crew, especially Matteo and Sarah, he suited up. We're not waiting for this to come to us, he said. If there's even a chance that artifact is intelligent, or tied to something beneath the surface, we need to understand it before it does something we can't undo. Ava joined him. And Lynn. Gregor would pilot the rover remotely, maintaining a communication link with the drone on site. The drive felt different this time. The silence heavier. The horizon, somehow, less welcoming. As they approached the crater, they saw it. It now stood fully upright, previously buried, now emerging from the Martian dust like a monolith. Sleek. Symmetrical. Unnervingly perfect. And at its base, glowing faintly, were symbols. Lines and dots, shifting, pulsing in sync with the waveform they'd tracked for days. Lynn gasped. They weren't there before. No, Elon said. They waited for us to return. Ava approached first, her gloved hand hovering over the glyphs. It's warm. Whatever this thing is, it's active now. Suddenly, Elon's comms crackled. Sarah's voice, tense. Elon, satellite scan just came in. There's a heat signature building under your position. Deep beneath the surface. Something's moving down there. The ground trembled again. Not violently. Just enough to remind them of the pressure building below. And then the pulse changed again. Not just faster. Louder. More insistent. As if it was speaking. Or warning. Or counting down. They raced back to the rover and returned to base under emergency protocol. The crew initiated full lockdown, sealing off external modules, conserving oxygen, stabilizing power. Matteo prepared med bays in case of radiation spikes. Inside the ops room, Elon gathered everyone. This changes everything, he said. We didn't just find a mineral deposit. We didn't just stumble on a rock. We made first contact, with something we don't understand. Matteo stepped forward. And we don't know if it's hostile. No, Elon replied. But we know it's not dormant. And it's not random. Sarah pulled up the waveform one more time. This new pattern, she said. It's forming a sequence. Almost like coordinates. To where? Lynn asked. Elon stared at the display. The coordinates weren't on the surface. They pointed beneath Mars. Miles beneath. That night, Elon sat alone in the observatory dome, Mars stretching endlessly outside. A red sea of dust and mystery. He hit record on his tablet. This isn't just about colonizing anymore, he said, voice low. It's about discovery. Something ancient is here. And we're not just surviving Mars, we're awakening it. If you're watching this, hit subscribe. Leave a comment with what you think the artifact is. Because this story isn't just mine anymore. It's humanity's. He paused, staring into the stars. What happens next might change everything. How far would you go for answers? A mile? 100? What if the truth was buried beneath a planet, and the only way forward was straight down? The decision wasn't made lightly. Drilling beneath the Martian surface had been on the long-term roadmap, a project reserved for future expansions once the colony was stable. But now, the mission had changed. The artifact wasn't just a relic. It was a beacon. And the data was clear. Beneath the artifact, something was waiting. In the command center, Elon stood at the center of a half-lit holographic display, surrounded by topographic maps, seismic readings, and 3D models of the subsurface. Gregor pointed to a cluster of overlapping data. Whatever's down there, it's not just a cave. We're looking at a void. Roughly 300 meters beneath the crater floor. And it's geometric. You're telling me nature carved perfect right angles into Martian bedrock? Ava asked. Gregor shook his head. I'm telling you this wasn't made by nature. Lynn leaned in. So we drill? Elon nodded. We drill. The next Sol, the team deployed Mol-X, a prototype thermal bore unit designed to melt its way through Martian regolith at a controlled rate. It wasn't made for something like this, not a 300-meter vertical shaft into alien ground, but Elon didn't believe in waiting for perfect conditions. They set up a mobile operations camp near the artifact. The tension in the air was thick. Not fear. Not excitement. Something else. Reverence, maybe. Like they were standing at the gates of a cathedral they didn't understand. Power stable, Ava reported. Thermal tips holding at optimal temp. We're greenlit to begin descent. The bore activated, and with a quiet hum, it began to disappear into the dust. Day 2 of drilling. Progress was slow. The Martian crust was denser than expected, laced with metallic veins that made the Mol-X groan with effort. The artifact above remained unchanged, its glow steady, pulse rhythmic. But by day 3, the bore broke through. Elon, Sarah's voice crackled on comms. We've hit the void. On the display, the bore's onboard camera showed it, an open space, unnatural and massive, carved beneath the surface with shocking precision. Walls that reflected light strangely. Angles that didn't make sense. Run a LiDAR scan, Elon ordered. The image that returned sent a chill through the room. The space below wasn't random. It was symmetrical. Constructed. A structure. They sent the drone next. Small. Agile. Fitted with lights and cameras. It descended through the borehole and emerged into the chamber. At first, static. Then, clarity. Everyone in the habitat crowded around the main screen. A stone-like corridor stretched ahead of the drone, walls etched with symbols that mirrored those on the artifact. But what drew gasps from the crew was the center of the chamber, a massive, spiraling column of light, floating above the floor, held in place by no visible support. What is that? Lynn whispered. Ava adjusted the feed. Some kind of power source. But it's not giving off heat. It's cold. Superconductive cold. Sarah pointed to a panel of symbols that flared as the drone passed. It's reacting to us. Not just the drone, our presence. Our signal. Elon, Matteo said cautiously, I think we should stop. We don't know what kind of radiation we're exposing ourselves to. Or if this thing is transmitting, out. Elon stared at the image on the screen. The spiral of light almost pulsed in sync with his heartbeat. I'm going down, he said. The descent team consisted of Elon, Ava, and Lynn. Wearing reinforced EVA suits, they rode a winch system down the newly bored shaft, hearts pounding, silent except for the crackle of static in their ears and the soft hiss of recycled air. The drop took 20 minutes. When they reached the bottom, the drone lights illuminated the massive chamber. It was like stepping into a cathedral built by no known hand. The air, or what passed for it, was still. Dead. Yet charged with something ancient. It feels like standing inside a frozen thunderstorm, Lynn muttered. Ava moved toward the column. Readings are stable. Still no radiation, no heat. Just, energy. Elon reached out, just like he had with the artifact above. As his gloved hand hovered near the spiral of light, the structure flared, once, then dimmed again. And then, a voice. Not heard, but felt. Like something inside their minds. Not words. Not sound. Just emotion. Curiosity. Recognition. Calculation. Elon staggered back. Did you feel that? Yeah, Ava whispered. I don't know how to describe it. It was like, being seen. Suddenly, the floor beneath them flickered, translucent symbols lighting up underfoot. The same language. The same patterns. But this time, they began to rearrange. Not randomly. To what? Lin asked. Elon stared in awe. To us. Back at the habitat, the team watched in stunned silence as live feeds captured everything. The light. The glyphs. The response. And then, the spiral pulsed brighter. Faster. Every 30 seconds. Then 25. Then 20. Sarah's voice cracked. It's sinking. Not to us. To something else, Gregor finished. Everyone turned to Elon. He looked back up the shaft, eyes wide. This is a countdown. That night, Elon recorded another message. If you're watching this, you're part of a moment humanity never thought would come. We found something. A structure. A signal. A countdown. This isn't fiction. This isn't simulation. It's real. And we don't know what happens when it hits zero. He paused, staring out the dome. But I do know this, we're not alone on Mars. Not anymore. What do you do when the unknown looks back at you? It had been exactly 6 souls since they first entered the underground chamber. 6 souls of decoding, analyzing, second-guessing. And the countdown? It hadn't stopped. The pulses from the spiral column now came every 9 minutes, a clear, deliberate sequence. The glyphs shifted faster. And more often. Like a language evolving in real time. Not random. Not passive. Back in the habitat, Sarah and Gregor had created an algorithm to track the symbol patterns. It's not just communication, Sarah said, tapping through the interface. It's a feedback loop. We input, it reacts. We input again, it refines the response. Like a learning AI, Gregor added. Only, it's learning us. Elon stood at the console, watching the looping footage from the chamber below. You're saying it's intelligent? Sarah hesitated. I think it's aware. The room fell silent. No one said it, but they all thought the same thing, they weren't alone on Mars. And maybe, they never had been. On Sol 52, the spiral stopped pulsing. Just for a moment. A stillness so total it made everyone freeze. Then, without warning, the light flared pure white, flooding the chamber with a blinding pulse that knocked Elon, Ava, and Lin off their feet. Their suit cameras went black. In the command center, Matteo jumped to his feet. We lost their feed. Sarah frantically tapped her keyboard. Power surge on all channels, external sensors down. Internal systems okay. But they're blind down there. Get them out, Matteo said. Now. But before they could activate the winch system, the screens flickered back. Elon gasped, coughing inside his helmet as the light dimmed. Status? I'm okay, Ava answered, dazed but breathing. Same here, Lin added, clutching her helmet. The chamber was changed. The spiral column was gone. In its place, floating midair, was a new object, a perfect cube, hovering silently, rotating slowly in zero gravity. Each face of the cube was etched with symbols, fluid, glowing faintly blue, and one of them matched the human DNA double helix. Sarah's voice came through, breathless. We're getting telemetry again. That cube, it's broadcasting. Broadcasting what? Elon asked. She hesitated. Us. Back at base, Gregor brought the signal up on the main screen. It's a mirror of every scan we've sent through the artifact and the chamber. Our language. Our biology. Our speech patterns. It's like it took everything we've shared and compiled it. Like it's building a dictionary, Ava said. No, Elon said softly. Like it's introducing itself. Lynn leaned forward. You think it's trying to communicate, directly? As if in answer, the cube rotated again, and a new symbol appeared on its surface. A circle. Inside it, a single dot. Not a word. An address. That night, Elon couldn't sleep. He stood alone outside the habitat, staring at the Martian sky. Stars burned cold and far away above him. And yet, something closer was calling. We came here to build a future, he said into his recorder. But maybe we weren't the first ones. And maybe we're not just building anymore, we're being invited. He paused. Or tested. The next sol, they launched a new probe toward the coordinates encoded in the cube's latest glyph. It flew low, scanning, mapping, until it reached a ridge near the planet's equator, far from their current zone. A place known only by a numerical marker on early Mars maps, Sector 9G, Rho. It was there that the probe found something impossible. Another artifact. Bigger. Older. Half buried beneath millennia of dust. And this one was humming. Inside the command center, the tension was electric. Sarah pointed to the live feed. The resonance matches the cube's signal. It's linked. Elon stared at the screen. This wasn't a one-off. No, Ava whispered. This was a network. And we just woke it up, Lynn added. Elon stood slowly. His face unreadable. We're going to Sector 9G, Rho. Matteo looked at him sharply. We haven't even finished analyzing this one. I know. But it could be dangerous. I know that too. A long silence. Then Elon spoke the words that would define the next phase of their mission. We didn't come this far to stop at the front door. Let's go see who's home. What if Mars wasn't a blank canvas, but a forgotten archive? For decades, scientists imagined the red planet as a dusty, lifeless desert. A place we could conquer, mold, and claim. But now? Now it looked more like a message in a bottle, buried beneath eons of silence. And that bottle had just been opened. The journey to Sector 9G, Rho wasn't easy. It lay 180 kilometers south of the habitat, beyond the reach of regular drones and supply rovers. Getting there meant loading up Starbug 7 again, this time with more fuel, oxygen, and a second power cell in tow. Gregor had outfitted it with a new, carbon-shielded sensor rig designed to withstand electromagnetic bursts, just in case. The team, Elon, Ava, Lynn, and now Sarah, who, after decoding the artifact's signal, insisted she had to see the second site with her own eyes. You said this is a network, she told Elon. Well, if we're going to map it, I need to be there when it speaks again. Elon simply nodded. Pack light. We roll at dawn. The terrain south of the habitat was brutal. Windswept cliffs. Jagged terrain broken by sand-filled valleys. Mars wasn't giving up its secrets easily. The team drove for nearly 20 hours across 2 sols, camping in temporary shelters, taking turns on watch. On the second night, as they camped beneath a rocky outcrop, Elon stared into the dark, red-streaked horizon. You think we were meant to find this? Ava asked quietly, handing him a ration bar. He chewed slowly before answering. I think Mars has been waiting. And we just happened to knock loud enough. They reached Sector 9G, Rho just past sunrise on day 3. The probe had been right. Half buried beneath a plateau of crimson stone was a structure unlike anything on Mars. Not jagged and foreign like the first artifact, but sleek. Architectural. A dark, matte triangle jutting up from the earth, like the peak of a buried pyramid. No seams. No entry points. And yet, it pulsed. Faintly. Steadily. Like a heartbeat. Sarah's voice cracked through the silence. That frequency, it's identical to the cube. This thing's been listening. Lynn walked slowly toward the structure, her boots crunching over ancient dust. We thought the first artifact was an outlier. A relic. But this is something bigger. They set up camp at the base and began testing the perimeter. No radiation. No heat signature. But electromagnetic fields danced just above its surface, barely detectable, yet unmistakably controlled. Sarah, now fully in codebreaker mode, pulled out the signal logs. It's like the second sight is completing the cube's pattern. The waveform, it's finishing sentences. Sentences? Ava asked. Sarah pointed to the visualizer on her tablet. Think of the first cube as a question. This is the answer. Suddenly, the artifact responded. A strip along the triangle's edge lit up, soft blue lines pulsing inward like a breath being drawn. Then came a tone. Low. Steady. Human-like. And then, the unexpected. English. At first it was rough, glitchy, robotic. But unmistakable. A voice. Recognition, signal, confirmed. Biologic match, achieved. Elon stepped forward, barely breathing. Who are you? He said aloud, even though he knew it was just playback. A pre-recorded loop, maybe. An automated response triggered by their presence. But the voice answered. Designate, watcher. Purpose, preservation. Observation. Archive. A chill ran through everyone. Ava's eyes widened. It's an AI. Sarah nodded slowly. Or what's left of one. The voice continued. Cycle reset, incomplete. Data loss, critical. System status, degraded. Lynn whispered, it's been offline for thousands of years. No, Sarah corrected. It's been waiting for us to come online. Suddenly, a beam of light shot out from the structure and hit the sand in front of them. A holographic interface began to build, a circular table of glowing glyphs suspended above the ground. A timeline. Only this one wasn't from Earth. It showed stars. Orbits. Planetary systems. And a line leading directly to Mars. As they watched, points along the timeline flickered, catastrophic solar flares, asteroid collisions, supernovae. And then, blank. A break in the timeline. Sarah tapped one of the nodes. The hologram zoomed into what looked like the inner solar system. She gasped. Elon, that's Earth. Everyone leaned in. Mars and Earth, side by side in ancient orbital configurations, with small markers moving between them. Wait, Lynn said slowly, her eyes locking with Elon's. You don't think. They were watching us, Elon whispered. From here. Long before we arrived. The final image made every hair on Elon's body stand on end. A projection of the first artifact, then the cube, then this triangle structure. And then, more. A ring of them, 12 total, scattered across the surface of Mars. Each labeled in the same glyphs, rotating like pieces of a celestial machine. Sarah's voice shook. This isn't just a network. A beat. This is a message, we haven't finished reading. That night, Elon sat at the edge of the camp, staring at the structure as it pulsed slowly under the starlight. We came to build a home, he recorded. But maybe Mars was a home once, just not ours. What if we're not just pioneers, but the inheritors of a civilization we never knew existed. He paused. We thought we were alone. That we were the first. But maybe, just maybe. He looked up at the stars. We're the second. Have you ever uncovered something so massive, so ancient, that it made everything you believed feel small? Mars had always been silent. But now it was whispering. Through signals. Through structures. Through the slow, rhythmic pulse of something that had waited eons to be seen. And what it was showing them now. It wasn't just a message, it was a map. Back at the main habitat, the crew had returned with more than just data, they had returned with proof. The triangle-shaped monolith at Sector 9G, Rho had done more than speak, it had projected a network, 12 interconnected points scattered across the Martian surface, each linked by a series of orbital nodes and unknown variables that hinted at both structure and intelligence. Ava stared at the 3D map rotating above the table. They're not random, she said. The geometry, it's intentional. Lin zoomed in. This isn't just a placement pattern. It's a design. Gregor ran a quick overlay with topographic data. They align with magnetic fault lines and crustal anomalies, places where Mars core activity is weakest. Sarah squinted at the glowing lines. If you connect all 12 sites. A pause. Elon finished the thought, it forms a ring. Not a perfect circle, but an engineered perimeter, as if something had once surrounded the planet. Or been used to protect it. Matteo shook his head. We're not just looking at tech here. This is planetary engineering. A planetary system. Elon couldn't stop thinking about the implications. 12 structures. All still dormant. All linked. Some buried. Some exposed to dust and time. Some perhaps completely lost. But if 2 had already reactivated? What happens when all 12 wake up? The team split into 2 task forces. Elon, Ava, and Lin would travel to the next nearest coordinate, Site 3, codenamed Argo Point, 90 kilometers north. Sarah and Gregor would remain at the habitat, continuing to decode signals and run simulations on the projected activation sequence. Matteo stayed behind to maintain systems and serve as mission control. If these are nodes in a system, Gregor said before they left, we need to understand how they interact. The cube and triangle responded to us, but what if the others require something else? A different input. Or, a key. Sarah agreed. If we trigger something without knowing how it's meant to operate. No, Elon cut in, voice steady. We won't trigger anything. He looked out across the Martian plains, where red dust shimmered beneath an orange sun. We'll complete it. Site 3, Argo Point was different. Where the triangle at Sector 9G, Rho jutted proudly from the surface, this one was nearly invisible, buried beneath an ancient landslide and layers of sediment. But it was there. Barely peeking out of a canyon wall, a curved black surface with the same resistance to drills, cutters, and sensors. Unyielding. Ava touched the surface with a gloved hand. It's cold. Like the cube. Same material. Lin walked the ridge above them. No glyphs. No light. No pulse. It's dormant, Elon said. Like it's waiting for something. They deployed a small energy beacon synced with the original cube's pulse pattern. If the sites were connected, the signal might act as a handshake. For hours, nothing happened. Then, just after Sol set, the ground trembled. Faint. Barely detectable. But enough to stir a whine through the canyon. Lin's voice came over comms. It moved. Ava looked up. What? The structure, Lin said. I swear, it shifted. Like a rotation. Like it opened an eye. Elon checked the signal monitor. One glyph had appeared in the dust, etched into the wall near the base. Same pattern as before. But this time, different color. Red. Sarah, watching remotely, felt her stomach twist. Elon, that's not the cube's response. That's a different signal. One we haven't seen before. Gregor's voice followed. And it's not just local. That glyph, it's bouncing between the other sites. We just picked up an echo from Site 7. Something's coordinating. Back at the habitat, the data team made a chilling discovery. The 12 structures weren't just connected, they were timed. Each one activated at precise intervals, corresponding with Martian orbital cycles and deep solar radiation fluctuations. A synchronization sequence. Like gears in a machine. Sarah enlarged the pattern. This isn't communication anymore. It's activation. A pause. Gregor's voice dropped. You think it's a countdown? No, Sarah said slowly. I think it's a startup. That night, Elon sat under the stars, recording again. If we're right, we just turned the ignition key to a system that's been offline for millions of years. Something too advanced to be Martian. Too aligned to be natural. And it begs the question. He looked out into the dark. Who built it? And what happens when it finishes rebooting? As the wind blew through Argo Point, and the red glyph shimmered beneath the dust, Elon felt something he hadn't in years. Wonder. Mixed with fear. And in the distance, just barely audible beneath the calm static. A low hum began to rise. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? What if the future wasn't ahead of us, but beneath our feet, waiting to rise? The hum didn't stop. It grew, slowly at first, like the planet was taking a breath after a billion-year silence. A low, bone-deep vibration that made even the rocks feel alive. The red glyph pulsed brighter at Argo Point, while across the planet, other sites began blinking online. At the habitat, Sarah sat frozen in front of the main screen, watching as glyphs began appearing across every known site. First 3, then 5, then all 12. Each responding. Each synchronizing. It's a cascade, she whispered. We didn't activate one structure. We activated the whole network. Matteo leaned in. They're not just echoing. They're syncing. Gregor ran a fast simulation. The pattern looks like a planetary net. It's drawing power from something, underground reservoirs. Solar absorption. Magnetic fields. No, Sarah said, eyes wide. It's drawing power from us. Back at Argo Point, Elon, Ava, and Lynn stared at the shifting glyphs on the canyon wall. Every line of ancient code now glowed red and gold, moving like liquid under glass. Beneath their boots, the ground thrummed with a rhythm too perfect to be random. It wasn't chaos, it was a heartbeat. Ava whispered, this isn't just awakening. It's coordinating. Elon placed his hand gently against the surface again. Unlike last time, it didn't reject him. The glyphs flared brighter. Then a panel clicked open. A doorway. The first one they'd ever seen. Suit up, Elon said, voice firm. We're going in. Inside, the structure was far larger than expected, like walking into the hollowed core of a mountain. The walls were smooth, metallic, lined with faint pulses of light that followed them like veins. Symbols lined the floor and ceiling, but these weren't just glyphs, they were schematics. Rotating diagrams. Energy models. Celestial mechanics. It's like a starship control center, Lynn murmured. But carved into a planet. In the center of the room, they found what looked like a console, a raised platform, ringed by glowing arcs of red and white light. A single central pedestal stood at its heart. On top. A sphere. Floating. Spinning. Alive. Ava pulled out the sensor wand. Minimal radiation. No heat. But a stable energy field like nothing we've catalogued before. Lin stepped closer. I think it's listening. The sphere pulsed in response. Then, for the second time in less than a week, a voice echoed, not through comms, not through speakers, but directly in their minds. Convergence, initiated. Designation, Earth origin. Role, catalyst. Elon flinched. Did it just call us a catalyst? A pause. Yes. This time, it answered in real time. Ava swallowed. Who are you? The sphere pulsed once. We are the architects. Memory bearers. Stewards of the Great Vault. Lin frowned. What vault? Another pulse. The Vault of Worlds. Back at base, Sarah and Gregor monitored the psychic feedback loop now pouring through the Argo Point uplink. There's no audio file. No frequency. The message isn't electromagnetic, it's quantum, Gregor said in awe. Like a consciousness imprint? Matteo asked. Exactly, Sarah replied. And it's not just broadcasting. It's conversing. Elon's having a dialogue with a relic of an ancient species. Inside the structure, the sphere continued. Mars was not the first. Nor the last. It was a node. A relay. A seed. Elon leaned forward. Seed for what? A long pause. Recovery. A flicker of an image filled the air around them, projected from the sphere. Planets. Dozens. Hundreds. Most were unfamiliar. A few, terrifyingly familiar. Earth. Venus. Europa. When the fall began, the architects dispersed the vault. Each world was given memory. Code. Hope. Ava whispered, this is bigger than Mars. Lin nodded slowly. This is a galactic network. Elon stepped onto the pedestal. The lights flared. Glyphs rose around him, orbiting his body like particles in a field. The voice returned. Conduit recognized. DNA sequence, Earth sentient. Access, partial. Partial? Elon asked. Completion requires convergence of 12. Suddenly, the room dimmed. Every structure on Mars, the 12 sites, flashed in unison in the hologram above. Then, the voice offered one final message. Reawakening sequence, active. Awaiting key. Elon stepped down, heart pounding. We're not just waking up machines, he said slowly. We're unlocking a legacy. Lin turned to him. So, what now? A pause. Elon looked up at the ceiling, then beyond it, into the Martian sky. Now, he said with a quiet smile. We find the rest. That night, as Mars turned silently beneath the stars, the 12 lit up for the first time in countless millennia, each one now active, glowing with ancient purpose. And deep beneath the Martian crust, something stirred. Something older than memory. Something waiting. The 12 were online. Mars was no longer dormant. Its bones, buried beneath centuries of dust, had started to stir. The planet that once whispered now hummed with power, like an orchestra tuning before the first note. And somewhere inside this grand, ancient mechanism was a vault. Not of gold. Not of weapons. But of worlds. In the habitat, the crew sat in stunned silence, staring at the reconstructed hologram now floating above the main table. A sphere, representing Mars, was surrounded by 12 glowing points. Each point connected to a larger star map, interstellar, spanning hundreds of systems. And then came the name again. The Vault of Worlds. Sarah zoomed in. It's not just theoretical. These coordinates, they're real. Gregor ran the numbers. These markers correspond to actual exoplanet systems we've identified from Earth. Kepler, TRAPPIST, Tau Ceti. Wait, Matteo cut in. You're telling me this vault isn't just on Mars? No, Sarah whispered. Mars is one vault. Ava, watching remotely from Argo Point, added, and now that we've activated Mars, the others might start responding. It's a chain reaction. Elon sat at the console inside the Argo Point chamber, still processing what the architects had shown him. Convergence of 12 unlocks the path, the voice had said. But what was the path? A map? A portal? A test? Lin had a theory. These sites, these vaults, were left behind as memory banks. Databases of culture, science, and maybe entire civilizations. If the architects seeded them, then maybe their plan wasn't just preservation. Elon turned to her. What, then? She looked back at him. Resurrection. Meanwhile, Sarah and Gregor dug deeper into the transmission logs coming from Site 3. Beneath the primary data stream, Gregor found something strange, a secondary layer of code, deeply encrypted and, oddly familiar. This encryption style, he said slowly, it's similar to 21st century quantum security. It's Earth-based. Sarah looked up. Earth-based? He nodded. As in, it learned from us. The implication was huge. The vaults weren't just ancient, they were adaptive. Responding to modern humans. Updating. Interfacing. And most importantly, waiting for humanity to reach the level needed to access what was inside. That night, back at Argo Point, Elon sat alone with the sphere. He reached out. Show me, he said quietly. The sphere responded. Light filled the chamber. Images swirled, planets with twin suns, cities hovering above oceans, ships that looked like creatures, creatures that looked like stars. Then, chaos. Planets burning. Civilizations falling. A virus of darkness spreading like wildfire through galaxies. And finally, silence. The fall, the voice whispered. Entropy given form. A force that consumes not matter, but meaning. Elon exhaled. Why us? Why Earth? Because Earth remained unbroken. Unclaimed. The last seed of choice. And now, it blooms. Meanwhile, Sarah found a buried protocol hidden in the vault interface. It was labeled simply, Arc Initiation. Inside, schematics. Construction plans. Not for buildings. Not for weapons. But for a ship. Or maybe something more. A hybrid. Part structure, part consciousness. Capable of planetary traversal and interstellar quantum jumps. Built from Martian alloys. Powered by an ancient energy source. Sarah turned to Gregor. This wasn't just a vault. A beat. This was a launch pad. Back at Argo Point, Elon opened a private log. If the architects seeded Mars, what else did they leave behind? What truths have we buried beneath centuries of our own assumptions? I came to Mars to build a future for humanity. But maybe, just maybe, we've inherited a past far greater than we imagined. He paused. Then added, almost a whisper. And maybe it's time we go see what's out there. A day later, the first component of the Ark was printed using Martian regolith and the vault schematic. It shimmered with energy, humming quietly like it remembered its purpose. And at its base, a new glyph appeared. Access, 1 of 12. The vault had begun to open. The countdown was no longer theoretical. And Earth? Earth would soon learn that Mars wasn't just a mission. It was a message. And the reply was on its way. The Ark had begun. A massive construction platform now stretched across the surface of Mars, tucked into the hidden valley near Argo Point. The early tests were promising. Regolith, heat treated to forge advanced alloys, was being shaped by automated tools into complex, organic forms. The machinery hummed, almost sentient in its movements, as though following the same rhythm as the planet itself. This wasn't just engineering. It was the resurrection of a blueprint written long before humanity had even set foot on this planet. And the construction was far more than just a ship, it was a vessel for consciousness. Elon sat in front of the vast holographic interface. The blueprint for the Ark unfolded before him, layers of codes and schematics cascading in midair. Every element of the ship was designed to serve a dual purpose, function and meaning. "Lynn," Elon called, his voice barely above a whisper. "Come look at this." She walked over, her boots clicking softly against the metal floor. When she saw the ship's structure unfolding, she froze. "This is," Lynn started, her voice betraying awe. "It's like a living organism." The lines of the design were elegant, curving, organic, almost like the skeletal structure of a bird's wing. And at its core, an intricate chamber surrounded by what appeared to be neural conduits. "It's built for more than travel," Elon said slowly. "This ship, it will carry the consciousness of the architects." "But why?" Lynn asked. "Why not just send data or messages? Why a body?" "That's the question, isn't it?" Elon murmured. "A message in the form of a vessel, perhaps they wanted to experience their journey. Or maybe it's more." Lynn looked up at the design again. "Maybe they were never meant to leave." Meanwhile, back at the habitat, Gregor and Sarah had made a chilling discovery. They had been analyzing the signals coming from the vault systems, still unstable, still far from fully understood. But one pattern had become clear: the Ark wasn't just a response to humanity's presence on Mars. It had been triggered by the ancient arrival of Earth-origin species, something far older than any living memory. Sarah flipped through the data. "It's like, the ship responds to the imprint of human emotions. This isn't just a machine. It's a mirror." Gregor's expression shifted. "A mirror for humanity's future." She nodded. "It's as if the ship isn't just built to carry the architects, it's built to carry us too." The crew had been working tirelessly on the project for weeks now. Automated systems powered by the Martian grid moved across the surface, carving deep into the planet's crust and assembling the Ark in stages. It wasn't just an engineering marvel, it was a collective effort, a collaboration between humanity and something far beyond. And yet, the question remained. What was it for? One evening, as Mars' twin moons rose high above, Elon stood at the edge of the construction site, looking up. He could see the Ark coming together, a colossal ring of materials, growing taller, more complex. But it wasn't just the ship that drew his eyes. It was what the ship was connected to. The 12 sites, each one now active, formed a perfect circle, glowing under the Martian sky. "Are we building a ship?" Elon asked aloud to no one in particular. "Or are we building a portal?" He turned back toward the Ark and saw the gleaming glyph etched across its hull. It wasn't a simple identification mark. No, this was a signal. A way for the ship to communicate with the 12 sites. And then it clicked. The ship is a key. A week later, Elon and Lynn made a final check on the Ark systems. The neural conduits had connected to every part of the ship now. The memory nodes were activated. The ship, once dormant, now thrummed with power, a deep, subtle hum that shook the ground beneath their feet. "This is it," Lynn whispered. The ship was ready. But the 12 had not yet completed their task. As the hologram above them shifted, Elon's gaze narrowed. "Activate all 12 sites," he ordered. The systems blinked, lights flashing in sync as a map of Mars appeared. And then, the ship began to glow, as if the core of the Ark had finally come to life. At that moment, Sarah and Gregor, deep in the data room, discovered the true nature of the Vault of Worlds. "It's not a repository," Gregor said, voice filled with disbelief. "It's a pathway. A network." Sarah's breath caught. "You mean, the vault is a gateway to these worlds?" Gregor nodded slowly. Yes. The vault was never just about preserving civilization. It was about transmitting it. If we follow the Ark, we'll have the keys to unlock a new chapter in galactic history. The crew gathered, staring at the Ark, now fully activated. The ship's surface rippled with energy, the neural conduits responding to an unknown force. The ship was speaking. And this time, it was calling them. Pathway, unlocked. Elon reached out, placing a hand on the glowing surface of the Ark. He closed his eyes, feeling the energy flow through him. Are we ready for this? Lynn stood beside him, her expression unwavering. We don't have a choice anymore. This is bigger than all of us. The next morning, as the sun rose over Mars, the final confirmation came through. The pathway was active. The stars had aligned. And the ship was ready to make its first jump. Elon turned to his team. Prepare for launch. It's time to see what lies beyond. The countdown began. The Ark stood at the heart of the Martian base, now fully operational, its glowing neural conduits pulsing like veins in a heart. Every inch of it resonated with the energy of Mars itself, as if the planet had become a living extension of the ship. The ancient architect design, once dormant, was now alive, waiting for the final signal, the final push. Elon, Lynn, Ava, Mateo, and the rest of the crew stood together, watching as the Ark systems powered up, each glowing glyph on its surface rippling with energy. The 12 Martian sites, now fully synchronized, pulsed in harmony, sending signals that fed into the ship's core. The long-forgotten vault had begun to open, and with it, the pathway to the stars. Is everything in place? Elon's voice broke the silence, his tone quiet but commanding. Gregor stood at the control console, his fingers flying over the interface, his face bathed in the eerie glow of the screens. All systems are green. The neural link is established. The pathway to the other worlds is ready for activation. Lynn glanced at the glowing map of stars above them, each point marked with coordinates they had never thought to visit. This isn't just about Mars. We're looking at the map to the rest of the galaxy. We're opening doors. Ava crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing as she studied the ship. And the architects? What are we supposed to do with them once we unlock their world? Elon stepped forward, his face grim. We're not sure what awaits us. But we've come this far, and we can't back out now. His eyes met each member of his team, a silent acknowledgement of the weight of the decision. They weren't just explorers anymore, they were the keepers of a forgotten past. And they were about to step into the unknown. The countdown began. T-minus 10 minutes. Attention filled the air as the final preparations were made. The team climbed into the Ark's control bay, a sleek, almost organic interior. It wasn't like any spacecraft they had ever seen before. The walls curved, and the console melted into the surfaces, as though the ship was a living entity and they were merely its passengers. Elon, seated in the pilot's seat, ran his hands over the control panel. The interface was intuitive, almost as if the ship itself recognized him, as though it had been waiting for him to join the journey. The ship was not like any machine. It was far more than technology, it was a bridge. A bridge between Mars and the rest of the universe. T-minus 5 minutes. Lynn worked alongside him, her hands adjusting settings on the neural link, establishing deeper connections with the ancient architecture that powered the Ark. As she did, she could feel it, a hum, a pulse beneath the ship's surface. The machine responded to her touch, syncing with her thoughts, her very being. It's alive, Lynn whispered, awe in her voice. We're not just passengers. We're part of this journey now. Elon nodded but didn't say anything. His mind was elsewhere. He was thinking of the Vault of Worlds, of the billions of years of history buried beneath Mars, and the secrets waiting beyond the threshold they were about to cross. The final minute was agonizing. The last few moments of absolute silence were broken only by the low hum of the Ark systems coming online, ready to execute the jump. The Martian base below them seemed distant, almost like a memory now. They were no longer on Mars. They were no longer Earthbound. They were about to leap into the void. T-30 seconds. Elon looked at the faces of his team, each one full of anticipation, fear, and excitement. This was it. They were about to leave behind everything they knew. They were about to venture into the vast, unknowable dark. He keyed in the final sequence on the ship's interface. "Engage," Elon said quietly. The Ark shuddered as the energy coursed through its neural conduits. The stars on the navigation screen flickered as the ship's engines hummed with a power far beyond anything the team had ever witnessed. There was no blast, no intense pressure. It was almost like the ship was folding space itself. And then, with a sudden rush, the ship wasn't there anymore. One moment, they were in Mars orbit, and the next, absolute darkness. For a heartbeat, the crew was suspended in nothingness. A strange, intangible feeling took over, like time and space themselves had ceased to exist. It wasn't an acceleration. It wasn't a deceleration. It was simply being, floating in a place where the laws of physics felt like suggestions. Then, as quickly as it had begun, light returned. But it wasn't the light of Mars. It was the light of another star. "Where are we?" Matteo asked breathlessly, his voice barely audible over the low hum of the ship. Elon's fingers danced over the controls, his mind racing. The stars above them were unfamiliar, shifting constellations, alien clusters of light. They were no longer in the familiar space of the solar system. They had crossed the threshold. "We're here," Elon whispered, his eyes wide. "We've made it." He turned to face the crew, each one staring at the viewports, each of them struggling to comprehend the magnitude of what they had just done. Lin spoke first. "How?" "I think," Elon began slowly, "this ship, this vault, it was never meant to be a spacecraft. It's a gateway. A living, breathing conduit between stars. The stars were not just distant points of light anymore. They were near, too near. And among them, a few flickered in strange patterns." A deep hum filled the Ark again. The voice returned. "Welcome, Earth origin. Pathway complete. Destination, uncharted." The team exchanged looks. There was no turning back now. They had unlocked the pathway to the Vault of Worlds, and beyond it lay a universe, untamed and unknown. A legacy. A future. And now, they were the stewards. Elon stood, looking out at the new universe before him. "Ready yourselves," he said quietly. "We've just entered a new chapter." The Ark drifted forward, propelled by the ancient forces that had awakened the ship. The universe stretched before them, infinite and full of possibilities. The crew had crossed the threshold. They had stepped into the void. And now, the journey began. The Ark floated in the starry expanse, its systems humming steadily as it sailed through the cosmic sea. The ship had traveled light years in an instant, and yet, it felt as though they were still anchored to the very moment they had left behind on Mars. The crew stared out at the alien constellations outside, each one unfamiliar, each one holding a mystery of its own. They had crossed the threshold. They were no longer in their familiar universe, bound by the laws of physics they understood. The ship, an extension of ancient technology, had taken them somewhere new, somewhere untouched by human hands. Elon stood at the helm, eyes fixed on the glowing map of unknown galaxies that lit up the console. He wasn't just an explorer now. He was a pioneer in a new world. And behind him, his crew shared the same sense of awe. This is real," Lin said, her voice trembling slightly with excitement. "We're in another galaxy." Ava nodded, her eyes scanning the distant stars. "But why? Why bring us here?" Elon's fingers hovered over the controls. "I think the answer lies in that glow." He pointed toward the center of the ship's navigation screen. There, a bright pulsating light was emerging from the heart of a distant nebula. Unlike any star they had seen, it was far too concentrated, too powerful. It pulsed in an almost rhythmic pattern, as if sending a signal. "We're not alone," Elon murmured. "Is it a natural phenomenon?" Gregor asked, his voice steady as he examined the readings. "Or, something more?" "No," Elon replied, shaking his head. "This is intelligent." Lynn stepped closer to the screen, squinting. "You're right. This isn't just a star or a dying nebula. That light is too focused, too organized. It's coming from something." Sarah, who had been running calculations on the ship's data systems, spoke up. "We've never seen anything like it. The radiation from the source it's not of this universe. This is alien energy." Elon turned from the console, meeting the eyes of his crew. "We have to investigate. Whatever it is, it's not just a signal. It's a message. And I think it's meant for us." The Ark adjusted its trajectory, moving toward the pulsating light. As they got closer, the intensity of the energy increased. It began to warp the space around them, distorting the fabric of reality like a rippling lake disturbed by a stone. It was as though the ship was being pulled closer by an unseen force. "We need to proceed with caution," Lynn warned, her hands tightening on the controls. "Whatever's ahead, it's powerful. It's alive." Elon nodded grimly. "Prepare for first contact. Let's see what happens." The ship entered the event horizon of the light's source, a glowing, shifting nebula. The energy surrounding them began to intensify, causing the ship's systems to flicker, then stabilize, then pulse in time with the beat of the alien energy. Then, without warning, the Ark stopped. The stars in the viewport stretched and twisted as if the fabric of space was being bent. The crew lurched forward in their seats as the ship was pulled into an unfamiliar space. Time, too, seemed to slow. And then, silence. A shadow filled the viewport. A colossal shape emerged from the shimmering energy. It was a massive entity, unlike anything they had ever imagined, neither machine nor biological. It was made of light, its form shifting and flowing like liquid, but with structures that seemed both geometrical and organic. "It's beautiful," Sarah whispered, awe in her voice. "It's alive," Elon replied, eyes wide. "And it's waiting for us." The entity loomed closer, its presence overwhelming. It seemed to radiate an energy that enveloped the Ark, syncing with the ship's systems. The hum in the air became a low vibration, resonating deep in their bones. "Is it communicating?" Gregor asked, his voice tense. "I think it is," Lynn replied, her hands shaking slightly as she adjusted the controls. "The ship, it's translating." The lights flickered in the ship's cockpit. A soft voice, not human but somehow understandable, echoed through the cabin. "Earth origin. You have crossed the threshold. Welcome." The voice wasn't coming from the ship. It wasn't coming from any physical source. It filled their minds, resonating in their thoughts, as if the entity was speaking directly to their consciousness. Elon sat back, processing the information. Are we speaking with it?" "It's telepathic," Lynn said, almost in disbelief. "It's reading our minds and responding." The entity continued to pulse, its form shifting and reshaping like liquid light. Its voice came again. "We have watched you. We have waited." Elon swallowed, his mind racing. "Watched us? Who are you?" The voice didn't answer directly. Instead, it responded with a strange, cryptic statement. "We are the keepers of the pathway. You are the next step. The legacy. The unbroken. The keepers?" Lynn repeated. "The ones who left the vaults. But why us?" The entity's presence seemed to grow more intense, and its response came again, softer now but still full of meaning. "The path has led to you. You are not the first. You will not be the last. But you are the key to the next." Elon understood. This wasn't just an encounter with a foreign life form. This was purpose. The architects hadn't just seeded Mars, they had laid out a pathway for a new age of exploration. And now, humanity had arrived at the precipice. The ship's systems blinked, as if answering the entity's command. A new path had been opened, and the coordinates flashed across the screen, a new galaxy, a new gateway. "We've been chosen," Elon said softly. "But for what?" The entity responded with a final, resonating thought. "To unlock the future. To carry the legacy. To journey beyond." The Ark began to move again, guided by an unseen hand, as the crew braced themselves for what was to come. The universe was no longer a vast, empty expanse. It was a network of possibilities, and humanity had just become a part of it. The Ark hummed softly as it glided through the shimmering void, the cosmic entity now far behind them but ever present in the crew's thoughts. The massive shape they had encountered, a being made of light, power, and mystery, had altered the very fabric of their journey. The crew had crossed the threshold into something far greater than they could have imagined. As the ship neared the coordinates provided by the alien entity, Elon sat in the command chair, his hands steady on the controls. His mind was still reeling from the conversation with the entity, but he knew there was no turning back. The entity had made it clear, humanity's role had only just begun. He turned to his crew, who sat silently, their expressions a mix of awe, disbelief, and anticipation. Lynn, at the navigation console, was still adjusting the ship's course. Ava, ever practical, kept scanning the data readouts. Gregor, Sarah, and Matteo were absorbed in the strange, encrypted signals coming from deep space, while Lynn analyzed the spatial anomalies surrounding them. "We're getting closer," Lynn said, her voice steady but filled with wonder. "The coordinates are leading us straight to it." Elon leaned forward, studying the readings on the console. "What is it, exactly?" Lynn looked up. "I don't know. But according to the data, it's not a star, not a black hole, it's something different. Something older." "The cosmic gate," Gregor murmured, reading the translation of the entity's last message. "The unbroken. The next step." The phrase reverberated in Elon's mind. The unbroken. It was a concept that had been mentioned in the ancient texts they had found beneath the Martian surface. The keepers, the architects, they had all referred to a journey that was to be unbroken, a thread of continuity stretching through the stars. But what did it mean for them, the crew of the Ark? What was their role in this vast cosmic tapestry? A shudder ran through the ship, pulling Elon from his thoughts. "We're here," Lynn said, her voice filled with awe. Outside the viewport, a massive structure appeared. It wasn't a planet, a star, or even a moon. It was something far more intricate, far more unnatural. A colossal, geometric shape hung in space, rotating slowly, like a gate. It was made of patterns and shapes beyond human comprehension, seemingly impossible, with angles and curves that didn't obey the laws of physics as they knew them. The cosmic gate. It pulsed with an otherworldly energy, glowing faintly with colors that didn't belong to any spectrum they had ever seen. The structure seemed to breathe, as if alive, as if waiting for something, or someone. Elon's breath caught in his throat. This is it. This is the next step. Lynn's fingers flew over the console, trying to make sense of the readings. It's not just a structure. It's a doorway. Suddenly, the lights inside the Ark flickered, and the hum of the ship grew louder, almost like a vibration passing through the hull. The ship's neural link flared up, responding to the energies around them. Ava stood up, frowning. The ship is reacting to it. The connection is getting stronger. Gregor turned to Elon, his face tight with anxiety. We need to be ready. Whatever happens next, it's going to be massive. Elon nodded. Prepare for anything. The ship moved closer to the cosmic gate, and with every passing moment, the energy surrounding the structure seemed to grow more intense. The air in the command bay grew thick, charged with an electric current, and the crew could feel the gravity of what they were about to do. Lynn's voice trembled as she read off the data. The energy readings are off the charts. If we go any closer, we might destabilize. Then let's not go too close, Elon said firmly. Engage the drone probes. We'll send them in first. Let's see what happens. The crew quickly deployed the drones, sleek, small machines designed to explore and gather data in the most dangerous environments. They launched from the Ark, their sensors transmitting back real-time data as they approached the cosmic gate. The probes moved through the energy field surrounding the structure, their instruments scanning, sending back images of the gate's surface. For a moment, the data was inconclusive. Then, suddenly, the transmission from one of the probes shifted. "Look at this," Matteo said, pointing to the screen. It's interacting with the gate." The probe's camera feed showed the surface of the gate shifting in response to the drone's approach. Patterns, geometric and impossible, began to glow and rearrange. The gate seemed to be alive, reacting to the probe as if it were communicating with it. "It's opening," Lynn whispered. The gate's surface rippled like water disturbed by a stone. Lines of energy cascaded across its vast expanse, and in the center, a deep vortex began to form, a swirling portal, a rip in the fabric of space itself. The drone's sensors went wild as the vortex pulled in the probe's data, creating a tunnel of light and shadow that consumed everything in its path. The ship's systems flared, struggling to adjust to the overwhelming energy. The portal expanded. And then, without warning, a massive pulse of energy erupted from the gate, sending a shockwave through space. The Ark's systems screamed in protest, and the crew was thrown back in their seats as the ship was rocked by the force. "Elon!" Lynn cried, her hands gripping the console. "We've lost control." The cosmic gate flared brighter, its energy surging. In that instant, Elon knew, this wasn't just a journey. This wasn't just the next step in their mission. This was the beginning of something far more profound. The crew had crossed into a new realm of existence, one that bridged worlds and dimensions. And the cosmic gate, was the key. "Brace for impact." Elon shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Activate the shields, all systems to full power." But it was too late. A blinding light filled the viewports, and the ship was pulled forward, toward the portal. The light consumed the Ark, flooding every corner of the ship. It was not the kind of light they had seen before, not the soft, warm light of distant stars or the harsh, sterile lights of their ship. This light was pure energy, a blinding force that seemed to stretch time and space themselves. The crew was tossed and pulled, gravity becoming unpredictable as they were thrust forward at unimaginable speeds. Elon's grip on the console tightened as the ship surged forward. The ship's systems struggled to adjust to the fluctuating environment, sensors flashing with warnings, alarms sounding in every corner of the ship. "Hold on!" Elon shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Activate stabilizers, now!" Lynn worked quickly, her fingers flying across the console as she engaged the emergency stabilizing systems. The ship shuddered violently, and for a brief moment, everything seemed to go still, no alarms, no flashing lights. Just a strange, suffocating silence. Then, as if the universe itself had decided to exhale, the light dimmed. The Ark had crossed the threshold. Elon opened his eyes, blinking against the sudden shift in the atmosphere. The hum of the ship had faded to a dull resonance, and the alarms had stopped, but something felt different. There was no longer any sensation of motion. It was as if they had arrived in a new reality altogether. Lynn's voice broke the silence. We're stable. We're in a completely different space." Elon stood, slowly, taking in the view through the viewport. What lay before them was beyond anything they had ever seen. The stars, if they could even be called stars, were different. They were not the familiar, steady points of light scattered across the void. These stars pulsated, shifting and shimmering in colors that were almost incomprehensible to the human eye. The vastness of space felt alive in a way that was alien, unsettling. It was as though they had entered a living cosmos. "We've crossed into another dimension," Gregor said quietly, his eyes wide with disbelief. "This isn't just a new galaxy. This is something else." Ava's voice was laced with wonder. "It's not just the stars. Look at the fabric of space. It's different. It's bending. Warping." The space around them was no longer stable in the way they understood. The laws of physics, the very fabric of spacetime, seemed to ripple and twist, as if they had left the familiar behind and entered a place where anything could happen. The crew gathered around the central console, the weight of their discovery pressing down on them. "Lynn," Elon asked, his voice measured, "what are we seeing here? Can you get any readings?" Lynn's fingers danced over the controls, but the results were disorienting. "Nothing makes sense. The ship's systems are trying to adjust, but the energy in this place is unlike anything we've encountered. It's as if the entire dimension is alive. We're getting waves of energy, but they don't follow any recognizable pattern. The gravitational fields, the electromagnetic fields, they're erratic." Elon frowned. "So, what does that mean for us? We can't rely on the same navigational data we've been using." "Everything we've learned doesn't apply here," Lynn replied, her voice strained. "We're effectively flying blind." The ship was silent for a moment, the crew lost in thought as they absorbed the enormity of their situation. They had ventured far beyond anything humanity had ever imagined. Yet, the more they discovered, the more they realized that they hadn't just crossed a threshold, they had entered a realm where their understanding of the universe, their place in it, and the very fabric of reality itself was being called into question. "Elon," Sarah said, her voice carrying a note of caution, "I don't think we're meant to be here." Elon turned to her, meeting her gaze. "What do you mean?" "There's something wrong with this place," she said, her expression tense. "It's unnatural. This dimension, these stars, they're alive, but in a way that feels wrong. It's like we're intruding on something that was never meant to be disturbed." Lynn nodded in agreement. "I felt it too. The energy here, it's almost sentient, as if the universe itself is aware of our presence." Elon considered her words carefully. "What do you suggest we do?" "We need to proceed with caution," Lynn said. "We don't know what kind of forces are at play here. We need to figure out exactly where we are and what we're dealing with before we take any more risks." The crew spent hours navigating through the strange dimension, studying the shifting stars and erratic gravitational fields. The ship's sensors continued to struggle against the overwhelming energy, and despite their best efforts, the data they gathered only raised more questions. Then, something changed. Out of the swirling light, a massive shape appeared, emerging from the void like a shadow. It was vast, impossibly large, dwarfing the Ark by several orders of magnitude. It was made of energy, like the entity they had encountered before, but this one was different. This presence was older, more powerful. And it was watching them. The crew watched in stunned silence as the shape grew closer. It was more than just a structure, it was alive. And it was aware of their presence. "Elon," Gregor said, his voice tight with apprehension, "this feels like a warning." "It's not just a warning," Elon murmured, his eyes fixed on the enormous presence. "It's an invitation." The massive being pulsed with energy, and as it approached, a thought entered Elon's mind, a message, not spoken aloud, but felt, as if the very fabric of space itself was reaching into his consciousness. "You are not alone. You have come to the door of the unbroken. Welcome." The crew stood frozen, overwhelmed by the enormity of what was happening. The being before them wasn't just a cosmic entity, it was the gateway to something far greater. They had crossed into a realm where the boundaries between life, consciousness, and the universe itself were blurred. "Elon," Lynn whispered, her voice shaking, "what do we do now?" Elon didn't know the answer. But one thing was clear, their journey was only just beginning. And whatever lay ahead, it was going to change everything. The vast cosmic being hung in front of the ark, pulsing with an energy so immense, it seemed to reshape the very fabric of existence. Elon's breath was shallow, his mind racing with possibilities and uncertainties. The message had been clear. They weren't just visitors in this dimension, they were part of something larger, something far beyond their comprehension. The presence in front of them, the being made of energy, light, and consciousness, was not a single entity. No, it was far more. It was a convergence of purpose, an ancient intelligence that transcended time and space. Elon could feel it, deep in his bones. This wasn't just a cosmic encounter, this was the beginning of humanity's new destiny. Elon, what are we supposed to do? Gregor's voice broke through the thick silence, his face lit by the soft glow of the being in front of them. This thing, it's offering us something. But what? Elon didn't know. He didn't have an answer, but the weight of the moment was clear. The ark had reached the doorway to forever. A chance, not just to understand the universe, but to reshape it. To become something more. Lynn, Elon said, his voice steady despite the whirlwind inside him, can you get a clear read on that thing? Lynn's fingers flew across the console, but the ship's systems had already been overwhelmed by the energy of the dimension. The usual patterns of navigation had been swallowed by the sheer force of the environment. I can't, she said, shaking her head. The systems are offline. It's like the gate itself is blocking our sensors, forcing us to rely only on intuition. Intuition, Elon repeated, slowly. He turned his gaze toward the entity, feeling its pull. It wasn't just a pull of gravity or physics. It was something far deeper. I think we're supposed to feel it. Understand it. Ava stood up from her seat, her face pale, but her eyes filled with curiosity and determination. We can't stay passive. If we don't make a move now, we might never get another chance. Elon nodded, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair. His mind was flooded with questions, but one thing was clear, they had to take the next step. No matter how impossible it seemed, they couldn't go back. Not after everything they had learned. Not after everything they had seen. Activate the beacon, Elon ordered. Let's see what happens when we open the communication channel. Lynn's hands moved quickly, engaging the ship's communication systems. The energy around them was chaotic, but as she focused, a soft hum began to emanate from the ark's central console. The beacon activated, sending out a pulse of energy that reached out toward the being. For a moment, the ship was still. The crew held their breath, waiting for a response. And then, the energy from the being began to coalesce. Light swirled around the ark like an ethereal wave, moving in patterns that were almost hypnotic. The very air in the ship seemed to shimmer as the light stretched toward them, touching the hull of the ship. A soft voice, almost a thought, entered Elon's mind. You seek the unbroken. Do you understand what you ask? The words resonated within Elon, as if the voice was not spoken with sound, but with thought. The being was not speaking in the way humans communicated, but in a form that transcended all language. It was sharing understanding, pure, raw, unfiltered. We seek to understand, Elon said, almost instinctively, as if the being had pulled the words from his own thoughts. We seek to become part of the unbroken. The unbroken is not a place. It is not a thing. It is a path. A continuum. To walk it is to leave behind all that you know. Elon's chest tightened. The unbroken. It was not just an entity. It was a journey, a transformation. Something greater than the sum of its parts. They hadn't just crossed a threshold, they were being offered the chance to transcend their humanity, to evolve into something more. What will we become? Elon asked, his voice barely a whisper. You will become what you must. The path is yours to choose. The gate is open. But understand this, to step through is to lose yourself. The journey is unending. Elon closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the words settle over him like a blanket of truth. This was the decision of a lifetime, or many lifetimes. Could they do it? Could humanity accept such a change? The path to the unbroken wasn't something they could simply walk through. It would reshape them, reshape everything they knew. What happens if we choose not to go? Ava asked, her voice firm but edged with uncertainty. The choice is always yours. But the door will close, and the opportunity will be lost. It may never open again. For a long moment, there was silence. The crew stood in awe of the entity before them, their minds grappling with the enormity of the choice they faced. The door to something greater, something eternal, was right in front of them. But stepping through it would mean leaving behind everything they had known. Is this what we've come for? Gregor asked, his voice shaky with emotion. Is this our destiny? To become part of this unbroken cycle? Elon looked around at the crew. Each one of them was a part of this journey, a journey that had begun with a mission to Mars and had now spiraled into the unknown. They had faced challenges, discoveries, and dangers no one had ever predicted. But this was something else. This was the beginning of something truly cosmic. I don't know, Elon said quietly. But we're here now. We've crossed the threshold. We can't go back. The light from the being intensified, almost as if it were urging them forward. The door was wide open now. All they had to do was step through. Elon took a deep breath. If we go through, we may never return to the world we know. Our lives, everything we understand, will change forever. But there is no going back. We must move forward. He turned to the crew, his gaze steady. Are you ready? Lynn, Ava, Gregor, Sarah, and Matteo all exchanged looks. Each of them knew the weight of this moment. They had come this far, and now they had to decide. We're ready, Gregor said quietly. Ava nodded. Ready. Lynn's eyes shone with a quiet determination. I'm ready. Sarah's face was calm, almost peaceful, as she spoke. Let's do this. Elon nodded. The decision had been made. Then let's step through the doorway. With that, the ark moved forward, its path illuminated by the light of the cosmic being. As they entered the doorway to the unbroken, they crossed not just space, but time itself. And as they stepped into the unknown, they knew they were no longer just explorers, they were becoming part of something eternal. As the ark drifted through the strange energy of the unbroken, the reality around them began to distort in ways that defied reason. Time, space, and matter all seemed to lose their familiar forms, folding and unfolding like the fabric of a dream. The stars that had once been distant points of light now swirled in geometric patterns that were both beautiful and terrifying. The crew of the ark had crossed into a place beyond the comprehension of any human mind, and now they were beginning the journey to understand what it meant to be part of the unbroken. Elon stood at the center of the command bridge, his hands gripping the controls, his mind working to make sense of the changes happening around him. The light from the cosmic entity still lingered, casting strange shadows across the ship's walls, shifting and pulsating like the heartbeat of a living being. It was as if the very ship itself was part of this new reality, vibrating in tune with the cosmic forces that surrounded them. Lynn, do you see anything? Elon asked, his voice tense. Lynn's fingers moved quickly across the ship's controls, but the systems were no longer functioning as they had before. The energy from the unbroken was so powerful that it seemed to be bypassing every sensor, every piece of technology they had brought with them. It's all static, Lynn replied, her voice soft but filled with awe. I can't get a clear reading. The ship it's reacting to the environment. It's almost like it's alive. We're not just in a new dimension anymore. We're part of it. Elon's heart quickened. If the ship was responding to the environment as if it were alive, then the unbroken wasn't just a place, it was a consciousness. It was more than a mere realm or dimension. It was a living, breathing entity, one that connected everything within it. What's happening to us? Sarah's voice trembled from behind him. This place, it's reaching inside of us. Elon turned to face her, his expression serious. I think it's doing more than that. I think it's transforming us. The crew gathered around the central console, each of them visibly affected by the strange forces of the Unbroken. It wasn't just the ship that was changing, it was them, too. They could feel it. A strange sensation coursed through their bodies, something akin to being pulled apart and reassembled. It wasn't painful, but it was deeply unsettling. It was as if their very molecules were being rewritten. Are you feeling that? Gregor asked, his voice strained. Yeah, Ava replied, rubbing her temples. It's like every part of me is vibrating with something I can't understand. Like I'm both here and somewhere else at the same time. Elon nodded grimly. He could feel it, too. The ship, the energy, the entity, they were all part of something far greater than any of them could fathom. The Unbroken wasn't just a dimension or a realm. It was an evolution. We have to hold it together, Elon said, his voice steady, though uncertainty gnawed at him. We're changing, but we can't lose focus. We came here for a reason. To understand. To evolve. But we can't lose who we are in the process. As the crew adjusted to the overwhelming presence of the Unbroken, they began to notice subtle changes. The space around them wasn't just shifting, it was communicating. Tiny ripples of light began to pulse through the walls of the ark, flowing like waves of energy through the very fabric of the ship. Each ripple seemed to carry a message, a fleeting glimpse of something far beyond their understanding. The more they observed, the more they realized that the Unbroken wasn't just a place, it was a conduit. It was a bridge between worlds, dimensions, and realities. It was the path that connected everything, linking all beings, organic and otherwise, into a vast, interconnected whole. Do you see that? Lynn asked, her voice filled with awe as she pointed to the viewport. It's not just the light. The stars, they're speaking to us. Elon's gaze followed her finger, and for the first time, he saw it too. The stars were no longer distant, unchanging points of light. They had transformed into something far more dynamic. They pulsed, they shifted, and within their depths, there were patterns, symbols, moving and reshaping in ways that seemed to communicate directly with their minds. I think the stars are the key, Elon said slowly. They're not just part of the landscape of the Unbroken. They're guides. We need to follow them. They're showing us the way. The crew spent hours observing the stars, trying to decipher the messages hidden within their pulsating patterns. It wasn't easy. The symbols were not like anything they had ever seen before. They weren't mathematical equations or simple codes. They were more abstract, emotions, concepts, memories, all encoded in waves of light and energy. It was as if the very language of the universe itself was being revealed to them. We have to trust this, Lynn said, her eyes locked onto the symbols. These aren't just random patterns. They're guiding us toward something important. Ava was the first to speak the words that had been hanging in the air. What if we're supposed to become part of the pattern? What if the Unbroken is transforming us into something else? Elon turned to her, his face somber. That's what I think is happening. We're not just travelers in this place. We're becoming part of it. The Unbroken is not just a journey, it's a state of being. It's a way of existing. A deep hum filled the air as the ark followed the pulsing stars, its systems now fully synchronized with the strange energy around them. The further they traveled into the Unbroken, the more the crew felt themselves change. It wasn't just their bodies that were shifting, it was their minds, their perceptions of reality itself. The boundaries between the ship and the cosmos began to blur. Do you feel that? Gregor asked, his voice trembling. I can see beyond the stars. Beyond space. It's like I can feel everything, all at once. Lynn nodded slowly, her eyes wide with realization. I know. It's like we're being merged with the unbroken. Like it's becoming part of us. Elon took a deep breath, closing his eyes as the overwhelming force of the experience washed over him. This was the evolution he had been seeking. It wasn't just about traveling to new worlds, building new technologies, or making history. It was about becoming one with the universe, understanding the infinite connections between all things. But there was a cost. We can't forget who we are, Elon said softly. We have to hold on to our humanity. We can evolve, we can change, but we can't lose ourselves in the process. As they followed the stars deeper into the heart of the unbroken, the crew felt the change growing more intense. They were no longer just travelers, they were becoming part of the great cosmic tapestry. And though the journey was breathtaking, it was also terrifying. Elon knew that the path ahead would be even more challenging. The unbroken was not a place for the faint-hearted. It was a place for those who sought truth, who were willing to shed their old selves in pursuit of something greater. But the journey had only just begun. The doorway to forever had opened. And now, they had to choose, to walk the path of the unbroken, or to step back into the world they had known. As the Ark moved further into the uncharted regions of the unbroken, the crew's transformation began to take on a new intensity. What had begun as an exploration of cosmic mystery was quickly morphing into something much more personal, something that reached deep into the very essence of their beings. The stars they followed were no longer just guides, they were testaments to the evolution unfolding within each of them. Elon stood at the viewport, staring out at the vast unknown. The universe stretched before him, alive with possibilities, shimmering with light and energy. Yet, in the midst of all this beauty, there was an undercurrent of fear, a fear that no one had dared to voice, but one that weighed heavily on all of them. What do we become when we no longer recognize ourselves? Elon murmured aloud, more to himself than to the crew. Ava stepped up beside him, her expression thoughtful. Is that what you're afraid of, Elon? Losing yourself? You've always pushed boundaries, but now, this is different. This is beyond. Elon nodded, his mind a swirl of conflicting emotions. The promise of the unbroken was clear, it offered them immortality, the chance to transcend the limits of time, to be part of a cosmic continuum that could stretch across eternity. It was a path that led to unthinkable knowledge, unimaginable power, but it was also a path that came with great sacrifice. The deeper they delved into the unbroken, the more they realized that they would have to give up everything they had once known. Everything. We've crossed a threshold, Elon said quietly. But I wonder if we can go back. Can we ever return to who we were before? The rest of the crew was gathered around the central console, their faces drawn and pale, their eyes filled with a mixture of awe and trepidation. Lynn had been silent for some time, but now she spoke, her voice low and steady. I don't think we can go back, Elon, she said, her eyes scanning the shifting stars outside the Ark's hull. We're not just moving through space anymore. We're moving through time, too. The longer we stay in this place, the more it changes us. And I think we can never leave the unbroken without losing something. Gregor looked up from his console, his brow furrowed. So, you're saying, we have to choose between becoming part of this, becoming the unbroken, and giving up everything we know about who we are? Exactly, Lynn replied. And with that comes the price. We may gain immortality, but we will lose our place in the world we left behind. We'll never be the same again. Ava's voice cut through the tense silence. Is that what the unbroken offers? Immortality? It's not just knowledge, it's eternity, isn't it? But at what cost? Elon turned to her, his eyes searching hers, trying to gauge her understanding. He could feel the weight of her question, and it struck him hard. Immortality was a seductive promise, but it was also a dangerous one. If they became part of the unbroken, they would transcend time, but they would be disconnected from everything that made them human. Elon, Gregor's voice broke in, what if immortality isn't what we think it is? What if it's not about living forever, but about losing what makes us human? The pain, the love, the struggle, those are what give our lives meaning. What happens when we take all of that away? Elon stood in silence for a long moment, considering Gregor's words. The question had haunted him since they had crossed into the unbroken. Could they remain human if they shed all the flaws, fears, and limitations that defined them? What would they become if they achieved true immortality, but at the cost of their own souls? I don't know the answer, Elon said finally, his voice quiet. But I do know that we have a choice. And we need to make it soon. As the crew continued to discuss the implications of their transformation, Lynn noticed a strange fluctuation in the ship's readings. She quickly accessed the console, her fingers flying over the keys as she tried to make sense of the data. Elon, Lynn said, her voice tense, I'm picking up something, some kind of anomaly. It's like the unbroken is reacting to us. The energy is escalating. What do you mean? Elon asked, stepping over to the console. Is it dangerous? I'm not sure, Lynn replied, her brow furrowing. But it feels like the closer we get to the heart of the unbroken, the stronger the pull becomes. It's almost as if we're being guided. Or maybe, tested. Ava crossed the room, her face a mask of concern. Tested? For what? I don't know, Lynn said, staring at the readings. But the energy, this force, it's responding to us. And the more we interact with it, the more it changes us. We're not just passive observers anymore. We're becoming part of this system. The realization hit the crew like a tidal wave. They were no longer just explorers. They were participants in something far greater, something that they did not yet fully understand. And the more they moved through the unbroken, the more they realized they would have to give up to continue. Ava turned to Elon, her face solemn. What happens if we decide not to go any further? If we turn back now, can we reclaim our old lives? I don't think we can, Elon said quietly, his eyes heavy with the weight of the truth. Once we've passed through the unbroken, there's no turning back. We're already changing. The question is, do we continue down this path and see what lies at the end, or do we walk away and lose everything we've gained? There was silence in the room. Each of them knew the gravity of the decision before them. The unbroken was offering them a chance at immortality, at transcendence. But the price was steep. They would lose their connection to the world they had once known, to everything that had defined their lives up until now. And no one could say for sure what they would become if they continued down the path. Elon stood before the crew, feeling the weight of the universe on his shoulders. We've come this far, he said quietly. We've seen things no one ever thought possible. But now we face the hardest choice of all, to continue forward, to become part of the unbroken, and to gain knowledge and immortality beyond anything we've ever imagined. Or to step away from it all and preserve who we are. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the room. I can't make this decision for all of us. But I do know one thing. If we choose this path, we will never be the same again. And we have to be prepared for whatever comes next. The hum of the ship continued, growing louder and more insistent as the ark neared the heart of the unbroken. The energy around them swirled in patterns that seemed to beckon, urging them forward. The price of immortality was before them. Now, it was time to decide if they were willing to pay it. The ark hovered at the precipice of the unbroken's heart, where the energy pulsed in waves so strong it felt as if the ship itself were alive, breathing in sync with the universe. Elon stood at the helm, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts as he stared into the vast cosmic sea before him. The promise of immortality, of becoming something beyond human, was within their reach. But as the final step loomed, the uncertainty of what lay ahead weighed heavily on him. Do we step forward into the unknown? Elon asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Or do we retreat from the edge of human experience, fearing the cost that comes with such knowledge? The crew had gathered around him in silence. Each of them felt the tension in the air, the weight of the decision that hung like a storm cloud. They had crossed so many thresholds, seen so much, and changed in ways they could not fully comprehend. But this was different. This was not just about pushing the boundaries of technology or discovery. This was about crossing into a new realm of existence. Elon turned to his crew. We know what lies behind us. But we have no idea what will become if we step forward. We'll be beyond the reach of anything we've ever known. And will be far beyond any help or guidance. Gregor, who had been deep in thought, was the first to speak. I've been thinking a lot about this. The cost of immortality is not just the loss of time. It's the loss of identity. The more we absorb from this place, the more we become part of it. But what happens to us when we leave everything we've ever been behind? What remains of us? I think we've already lost pieces of ourselves, Ava said softly, her gaze distant. The moment we entered this place, we began to change. Our minds, our perceptions, our very essence. I can feel it, like something is tugging at me, pulling me apart and putting me back together in ways I don't recognize. Lynn nodded, a thoughtful expression on her face. It's not just about immortality, is it? It's about transcendence, becoming something more, something that can't be defined in terms we understand. But are we ready for that? Can we handle it? Elon ran a hand through his hair, the weight of their transformation pressing heavily on his shoulders. The more I think about it, the more I realize that we don't have to understand everything. We don't have to control it. But we do need to decide if we want to embrace what comes next. We've opened the door to a new phase of existence, one that goes beyond our understanding of life and death. But once we walk through it, there's no going back. The stars outside seem to shimmer more brightly now, almost alive, as if waiting for their next move. The Unbroken had changed everything they had ever known. It was not a place of simple exploration, it was a place of transformation. Every choice they had made up until now had led them here. And now they stood at the edge, with the horizon of their former selves behind them, and the unknown ahead. Are we afraid of what we might become? Ava asked, her voice barely audible, as if speaking too loudly would break the fragile stillness. Yes, Elon replied, turning to her. We're all afraid. But sometimes, the greatest fear is not the unknown itself, but the knowledge that we will never be the same again. And if we let that fear stop us, we'll never move forward. Lynn stood from her seat, walking slowly toward the viewport. The Unbroken has shown us a glimpse of something beyond. Something that defies the limits of everything we thought we understood. Maybe we were always meant to take this step, to evolve in ways that go beyond human comprehension. Or maybe, Gregor said, we were meant to understand that some things should remain beyond us. Maybe there's a reason humans are not meant to transcend the boundaries of time and space. It's too great a risk. Elon turned back to the helm, staring at the swirling patterns outside, his mind racing. The horizon is not just a place we're heading toward, it's a metaphor. It's the point where we can no longer look back, where our old selves will no longer exist. We'll be beyond it. And once we cross, we might not even recognize what we become. A heavy silence filled the room, the weight of the choice pressing down on each of them. There was no more time for indecision. They had come this far. The question was no longer whether they should take the step, it was whether they were prepared for what came after. Elon closed his eyes for a moment, centering himself. When he spoke again, his voice was firm. We didn't come here to turn back, he said. We came here to change. To become something greater. But we need to do this together. Whatever happens, we need to remember who we were. Who we are. Because that's the only thing we can hold on to. The crew nodded, their eyes filled with a mixture of fear, anticipation, and determination. They were no longer just astronauts on a mission, they were part of something far larger. They were standing on the edge of immortality, a place where humanity and the unknown collided. They were about to cross the boundary of human existence and step into a future beyond anything they could imagine. With one final glance at each other, Elon pressed the command that would send them forward. The Ark's engines hummed as the ship surged forward into the heart of the Unbroken. The stars outside twisted and warped, the energy field around them flaring as the ship was enveloped by the unknown. As they crossed the threshold, the crew felt the pull of the transformation. Their bodies trembled as the energies of the Unbroken surged through them, changing them in ways they could not understand. Time bent around them, and for a moment, they were no longer in the ship, they were part of something greater, something that transcended the limitations of space and time. The light around them grew brighter, and for a moment, everything went silent. The Ark, the stars, the universe, all of it seemed to disappear as the crew crossed into a new state of being. Their bodies felt light, almost ethereal, as if they were no longer bound by the constraints of the physical world. Then, as quickly as it began, the sensation faded. The crew found themselves standing in an entirely new reality, a realm that defied all understanding. They were no longer on the Ark. They were no longer human. They had crossed into a place beyond the horizon of time, where the boundaries of existence had dissolved. Elon's voice broke the silence. "We've done it. We've crossed into the Unbroken. But what comes next?" As they looked around them, they realized that the journey was far from over. They had crossed the threshold, yes. But the path forward would reveal everything, and perhaps, nothing, all at once. The Ark had crossed the threshold into the heart of the Unbroken, but what awaited them in this new realm was unlike anything they could have imagined. The universe they had known, with its familiar laws and structures, no longer applied. Here, in the infinite expanse of the Unbroken, reality itself felt malleable. Time had no hold over them, and the concepts of space and distance twisted in ways that defied reason. They were no longer bound by the limitations of human perception. The very fabric of the cosmos had unraveled, leaving them suspended in a surreal space where the impossible seemed possible and the unimaginable could be touched with the mind. Elon stood in awe, the crew surrounding him, their expressions a mixture of wonder, fear, and confusion. The stars outside had dissolved into a swirling, ever-shifting mass of light, energy, and unknown forces. It was as if they were suspended in a dream, yet everything around them felt deeply real, as though they could reach out and touch the very soul of the universe. Ava was the first to speak, her voice barely a whisper. "Is this it? Is this the Unbroken? Are we truly beyond everything we've ever known?" Elon didn't answer right away. He couldn't. How could he? There were no words for what they were experiencing. They had stepped beyond the boundaries of time, beyond the comprehension of the human mind. But one thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same again. "We've transcended," Elon said quietly, his voice a mixture of awe and uncertainty. "But I'm not sure if we've reached the end of the journey, or if we've just stepped into a new beginning." As they looked around, the crew began to notice subtle changes in themselves. Their senses were heightened, far beyond the physical limits they had once known. They could feel the pulse of the Unbroken, its rhythm syncing with their hearts, their minds, their souls. Their thoughts seemed to travel faster, as if the very air they breathed was charged with pure potential. They were no longer just living, they were alive in ways they hadn't thought possible. Lynn, who had been standing silently, spoke next. "I can feel it, the energy. It's not just around us, it's inside us now. We're part of this place." Gregor nodded slowly, his face a mixture of wonder and apprehension. "But at what cost? We've given up everything to come here. Our past lives, our humanity. How much of us is still left? How much of what we were remains, if anything?" Elon closed his eyes, taking a deep breath as he processed the question. He had spent his life seeking knowledge, pushing boundaries, and now, standing here at the edge of the infinite, he realized that the answers he had sought had led him to an unimaginable truth. "I don't know," he said finally. "But we can't go back now. We've crossed into something, far beyond what we can understand. This is the price of immortality. But the question is, what do we become next? The crew stood together in silence as they absorbed the magnitude of their situation. They were no longer human, not in any conventional sense. They had become part of the unbroken, part of a reality that existed beyond time and space. And yet, despite the overwhelming nature of it all, there was a sense of profound clarity in the air. For the first time, they understood something fundamental about the universe, that existence itself was a fluid, ever-changing force, and that to truly transcend, they had to let go of everything they thought they knew. A voice echoed in the vast emptiness, a voice that was neither male nor female, but somehow both. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Welcome, travelers. You have crossed the threshold of the unbroken. You have transcended the confines of mortal understanding. But what now? You stand at the edge of infinity. Do you wish to continue? To embrace what lies beyond the horizon of existence?" The voice was calm, yet filled with power, and it sent a shiver down the crew's collective spine. For the first time, they realized they were not alone in this place. The unbroken was not a void, it was alive. "What do we do?" Ava asked, her voice filled with both reverence and fear. "We've come so far. But is this really what we want? Can we truly embrace the infinite? Are we ready to step into something that will change us forever?" The voice answered, its tone resonating within their minds. "You are ready, for you have already chosen. This is the final step, the true test. The journey is not one of understanding, but of becoming. To cross this final threshold is to leave behind everything you once were and become something new. But you must decide. Do you wish to exist beyond time and space, beyond death and birth, forever and ever in a state of being?" Elon turned to his crew, his gaze meeting each of their eyes. There was no easy answer. The truth was, they had all wanted this. They had all sought something more, something that could not be explained by science or reason. But now that they were standing on the edge of eternity, the weight of the choice was unbearable. "I don't know what it means to truly become," Elon said quietly. "But I know this, we came here seeking the unknown. We came here to evolve, to transcend. And I think this is the next step. We have to move forward. Not just as explorers, but as beings of this new reality." The crew nodded in silent agreement, understanding that to move forward was to accept the unknown fully. There was no returning to what they had been. They were already different, changed by the very forces they had encountered in the unbroken. With a collective breath, they stepped forward together. The moment they did, the universe around them shifted. The boundaries of space and time fractured, revealing infinite paths stretching out before them. They were no longer just in a ship or a world, they were everywhere, a part of everything that was, is, and ever would be. In that instant, they understood that immortality was not simply about living forever. It was about becoming part of something greater, a force that transcended individuality. They were now part of the unbroken, and the unbroken was part of them. There were no more questions, no more fears. There was only being. They were eternal. The stars around them pulsed with a rhythmic hum, each one a reminder of the infinite paths they could take. Time, as they knew it, no longer existed. They were beyond it. And as they stood in the vast expanse of the unbroken, they realized that what they had truly gained was not immortality, but an understanding of the infinite, and the choice to become part of it. As they looked into the distance, beyond the horizon, they felt the pull of countless possibilities. They were no longer bound by the limits of mortality. They were free to evolve, to change, to experience all that the universe had to offer, forever. And so, their journey continued, not in search of answers, but in search of being. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?